Clyde Williams and Barry Loggins were driving home after a 4th of July get-together. It was a nice summer night. They had the windows down.
July 4th in Colorado Springs area, there's a lot of people out celebrating early, celebrating late, running fireworks all the time.
Bro, I'm so psyched about this weekend. You're going to Bobby's party, right?
For sure.
Nice. Man, them Roman candles he got, gonna be awesome. Dude, what the hell is this guy doing? God, help me. Please. Yo, what happened, man? Oh, my God. What are we gonna do?
They see that he's been shot. This guy is in bad shape. He's bleeding profusely, and he subsequently loses consciousness.
Oh, no, dude. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Somebody help. Call 911 now.
Is he okay?
Call 911.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
"30 minutes later, Kenda steps out onto East San Miguel.
Hey, Mike, so what do we got? The Vic is 27-year-old Donald Zampa, shot once in the back. He's currently at Memorial Hospital in critical condition.
Donald Zampa is 27 years old. He's only been in Colorado Springs for a few months, and he is a maintenance worker at a local motel.
Any witnesses? The two guys that found him didn't see anything. Now, we are currently canvassing the neighborhood as we speak. This our guy right here, huh? Right there.
The crime scene itself is bloodstained, of course, and there's some medical waste laying around, and also the shirt and sport coat worn by the victim. It is unusual to find someone wearing a sport coat and tie in this neighborhood at 2:30 in the morning. So where did he come from, and where was he going to, and what interrupted that?
Now, the slug is over here. CSI said it looks like a 38. So it went right through him, huh? Yeah.
He's been shot in the back, and it exited his chest.
Could have been a robbery. Did you find any money on him? You know, I thought the same thing, except that his wallet's still in his pants right there, with 20 bucks still in it.
Well, that's strange. If this is a robbery, why wouldn't they have taken his wallet?
It could be an intentional assault against Donald Zampa for some reason, some perceived wrong he's committed against someone, some enemy of his. At this point, we have many more questions than we have answers.
Hey, Sergeant. Got the kid that called in the shooting if you want to speak to him.
Sure, where is it?
It's right down here.
Chris Powell is a white male, about 18 years old, kind of small in stature.
Can you tell us what you're doing out here tonight?
Well, I wasn't out. I was at my buddy's place down the street.
What were you doing there?
I'm staying there. I came from Ohio, so I'm kind of figuring out the job situation. You know, it's really hard these days.
Yeah, I understand. But tonight, how'd you end up calling the police?
He tells us that he hears a gunshot. He looks out, he sees the victim down and sees two other people running up to him to help.
So I figured the best thing to do was call you guys.
So you didn't see the shooter or anyone suspicious?
No, sir. No, sir.
You look extremely nervous, Mr. Powell. Is there more to this story that you're not telling us?
Is everything all right, Chris?
Yeah, I'm fine. It was just crazy to see, you know? That's all. Is that guy gonna be okay?
We don't know. Thank you. He was awfully nervous. Sure was.
Here's an 18-year-old, probably has never seen somebody shot. He may not be hiding anything, but we, being cops, are gonna question that.
Hey, Sergeant. We just got word from the hospital. The victim's conscious.
Okay, good. I'm gonna take a ride over to Memorial. I want you to go ahead and supervise the rest of the canvas. I'll be right back. You got it.
This is good for us. There might be something he could tell us that'll help clear up this matter.
Excuse me, can I have a minute with him?
Sure. We need to make it quick. He's not out of the woods yet. We're prepping him for another surgery.
The victim in this case is shot in the back. It's a perforating gunshot wound and ends up going out the chest. So anytime you have somebody who's got a perforating gunshot wound in the chest or abdomen, there's a lot of very important organs that are between the entrance and the exit wound. Those cases are immediately life-threatening, and they have to be treated that way. You're gonna start bleeding, you're gonna have significant pain, you may not be able to breathe really well. All those things can contribute to loss of consciousness. When a bullet passes through a body, it's going to cause damage not only in the organs it pokes holes in, but it can also cause damage other places as this big pressure wave goes through the body. So number one, you're worried about bleeding. Two, significant injuries to vital organs like lungs and heart. Even if you survive the initial period, you're not out of the woods yet because there's a significant risk of infection that's going to be created by these injuries. There's a lot of things, obviously, that have to go right for you to be able to survive.
This may be the last opportunity for Donald Zampa to say anything, because if he doesn't survive the surgery, then the only statement we're going to get is what we're going to get right now.
Donald, I'm Sergeant Kenda. How you feeling?
I've been better.
I'm sure. Listen, I need you to remember everything you possibly can about what happened tonight.
Okay. I went to Graham's for a drink and to watch the game.
Graham's was more of a neighborhood bar where people hung out. People knew each other, and Donald was a regular customer.
He tells us that he left the bar and he was walking home. As he's walking, he hears somebody yell at him.
Don't turn around.
Whoa, man.
And he feels what he believes to be a gun pushed into his back.
Keep your hands up and get on your knees.
Come on, man. Easy.
I had no idea what was happening, so I just did whatever the guy told me. But then as soon as I knelt down, I heard this loud crack and my chest got hot. Then everything went numb and I couldn't move.
So, of course, we asked Donald, do you have enemies? Is there somebody out to get you? He said, oh, no, I don't make enemies. I make friends. So that eliminates the possibility of most likely a known person to him. This is someone that doesn't know him at all.
Now, I know you said you had your back to the shooter, but did you see him at all or have any idea what he looks like?
No. Even if I did, I don't think it would have mattered much. Without my glasses, I'm legally blind.
Sergeant, it's time to head out.
All right, just one more question. Is there anything at all you can remember about this guy?
Yeah, actually. He had an accent, maybe like a Hispanic accent.
All right, well, thank you.
Sorry, Kenda.
I understand.
Kenda heads back to the crime scene with troubles on his mind.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, what do we know? Is he an Hispanic male? Probably. Does he know Donald Zampa? Probably not. We have very little to go on here. Very little indeed.
Mike. Hey, Kenda. You get anything at the hospital?
No, I didn't get much. It says the shooter sounds Hispanic.
That's funny. We got a witness who says he saw the shooter, thinks he looks Hispanic.
Really?
Well, now, maybe that's our guy. That's the first interesting thing I've heard tonight. We're working on the shooting of 27-year-old Donald Zampa. All we know is his shooter sounded Hispanic. But now we have a witness who claims to have seen the shooter. Our witness is Edward Esterly. He's living immediately adjacent to the scene.
We were told you saw something tonight?
He reports that he has been up and down during the night because in the last several days, they've been having problems in this neighborhood with break-ins of cars.
When I looked out the window to check on my car, I saw this Hispanic guy looking into it. But when I got outside, the guy was gone. And then I heard the gunshot, and I got the hell out of there.
So could that mean that this Hispanic male was looking to steal something out of cars? And at that moment, he notices Mr. Zampa strolling down the street. And does he decide he needs to remove a potential witness?
Don't turn around. Keep your hands up and get on your knees. What this guy look like?
He was definitely Hispanic, I guess 25 to 30 years old.
You remember what he was wearing?
Yeah, he had on this weird-looking Hawaiian shirt.
Hawaiian shirt.
Is this guy possibly the suspect? We don't know, but that's where we're headed at this point.
Hey, Sarge. Hey, we still got a guy matching that description.
Oh, where is he?
He's in the cruiser.
Thanks for your help.
Well, could this be our mysterious man?
Step out.
Tell us your name.
Miguel Diaz.
He does not have a Hispanic accent. He has no discernible accent whatsoever.
That really kind of blows our theory out of the water, but we still look into him.
So what are you doing out here tonight, Miguel?
I was on my way home, and I heard a couple guys shout that someone got shot. Saw the guy lying on the street, so I ran off, found a payphone, called 911.
You check on that for us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, we got some reports of a guy in a Hawaiian shirt peering into vehicles. Can you tell me about that?
I just really like cars. Checks out.
We were able to confirm that he had called 911 to report this crime. So his story is holding true. Maybe he's a BMV suspect and not a murder suspect.
Okay, Miguel. You're free to go. Just make sure we get his name to burglary, okay?
You got it.
So we're still at the beginning. Who confronted Donald Zampa? It wasn't Miguel. Then who was it?
Over the next few days, no new leads materialize.
Everyone we've encountered so far who could be, might be the guy is not the guy. The only good news is Zampa continues to live.
So in a case like this, to have a gunshot wound that goes through your back and then out your chest, it's really a miracle that an organ or the spinal cord wasn't struck. Every organ's right next to each other. So to make it from one side to the other without hitting one of those and killing you is a matter of inches that saves this man's life.
Well, as police are getting frustrated about the lack of leads in this case, they do get some good news, and that's that Donald did well in surgery and he's gonna survive. So that's great. But this is gonna be something that changes his life forever. He's probably, obviously gonna suffer the physical effects of what happened to him, but emotionally, can you imagine the fact that not only did this happen to me, but whoever did it to me is still out there, hasn't been found. They still don't know why it happened to me. It'd be the kind of thing that probably for the rest of your life, you'd always be looking over your shoulder, wondering, could something like this happen to me again? It would be a very fearful, life-changing experience that, yes, I recovered from it physically, I survived, but emotionally, it's always gonna be in my mind and a part of my life.
But an unexpected tip is about to send the case in a whole new direction.
Sir, there's a call for you. Somebody from Cincinnati. Want to talk about the Zampa case?
Cincinnati? Which line?
2.
It is unusual to get a call from another state about a case that's only a few days old in your city. That is a real indicator that whoever is on the other end of that phone has some direct knowledge.
Sergeant Kenda, who am I speaking to?
Hello, sir. Yes, my name's Charles Norton. I'm calling because my stepson has something he needs to talk to you about regarding the shooting the other night.
And who's your stepson?
His name is Chris Powell.
Chris Powell, huh?
That name hit me like a slap in the face. You mean the nervous little kid that was at the crime scene?
Hello?
We were suspicious at the time that Mr. Powell knew more than he was saying, and we were right. So the phone rings, and it's a call from Cincinnati, Ohio, and it is a wealth of information.
Chris, this is Sergeant Kenda. You remember me?
Yes?
And you have something you need to tell me?
Christopher.
You can hear in the background his stepfather basically saying, you either tell the truth or you're out on your ear and you have no place to go.
I didn't tell you the whole story.
I didn't think so, Christopher, so here is your second chance to be truthful.
The other night, when I said I was at home, I was actually headed home with a friend of mine.
He identifies his friend as Rodney McFarland. He's 21 years old.
This McFarland, he's a white guy?
Yes, sir.
We're kind of questioning this because we're looking for a Hispanic male.
All right, so what happened?
Well, Rodney was driving. No. What's wrong, man? And as soon as we pulled up on the San Miguel, The car stalled.
Oh, no, come on, you piece of crap.
Rodney's upset because he didn't have any money to fix this car to make it run. And they both see this guy coming toward them on the sidewalk, wearing a suit and tie, and he's obviously drunk.
Look at this fool.
Rodney turns to Powell and says, I'm gonna get this guy. I'm gonna rob him and take his money.
Oh, you can't just rob the guy, you know? What if you get caught, huh? Don't worry. This guy's my voice.
And he told me he was going to speak in a Hispanic accent, so the guy wouldn't be able to identify him.
Chris Powell's explanation for the accent gives newfound credibility to his story.
The only person who knew that was the victim, and the only way you could know it is if you were standing there like you said you were. I absolutely believe Mr. Powell has come forward, finally, with the truth.
So what happened next?
Well, he ran up to the guy. I heard a bang, and I just started running. You know, now listen, I tried to do the right thing, you know, by calling the police. It's just that I got a little scared afterwards. So, I'm back here with my folks in Cincinnati.
Chris wanted to do the right thing, and he maybe needed that extra support from his family to come forward and give that information.
Despite Chris Powell's story, there's still one detail that doesn't add up.
Do you know why Rodney shot the victim instead of taking his money?
I don't know. I couldn't even believe he did it.
So do you know where the gun is?
Yeah. He told me he keeps it in this, like, big case for cassettes. It's probably in his room somewhere.
Where's Rodney live?
We're able to obtain a warrant for the arrest of Rodney, and we go to that residence in an effort to execute that warrant.
You make an assumption that Rodney is armed and he's going to resist, so you approach guns drawn.
Hey,
We're looking for Rodney McFarland.
my brother? He ain't here.
You sure about that? Harboring a fugitive's a felony.
Mr. McFarland, where is your brother?
If Joe Kenda tells you you're going to tell me where Rodney is, you're going to tell him where Rodney is.
He's in the back.
Step aside.
This is a very intense and high-risk operation at this point, because he could be on the other side of the door just waiting for us to come in.
Hey! This is the police! Come out with your hands where we can see them! If you don't come out, we're coming in!
And you won't like what happens next when we come in.
Let me see your hands!
I didn't mean to.
Go ahead and cuff him.
Rodney doesn't want to engage. He is just frightened.
Turn around. Where's the gun, Rodney?
I don't know. I want a lawyer.
All right, get him out of here.
Yeah.
Fine, that is your constitutional right, Mr. McFarland. But right now, you're going to jail.
Let's find that gun. Hey.
We do find the gun in a cassette case, just as it was described.
This looks like a 38. Well, that's the one. This bag, get the hell out of here.
Although Rodney McFarland refuses to talk, ballistics testing on the gun does all the talking Kenda needs.
The gun is determined to be the weapon that fired the shot that entered and exited Mr. Zompek, and further, the weapon is defective. It would easily fire without touching the trigger.
It's a defective piece of crap, is really what it comes down to. And if you think about our case, it could very well be just that. The defective gun caused this to be a shooting as opposed to just a robbery.
Evidence of a faulty gun gives Kenda a much better understanding of how events unfolded the night Zampa was shot.
Damn it.
Just try turning it back on.
Look, it ain't gonna work. The hell am I gonna get the money to fix this damn thing?
He's complaining that this thing is nickel and diming him to death.
And Mr. Zampa comes walking down the street in his coat and tie and looks like he might have a few dollars on his person. McFarland has no knowledge of who Donald Zampa is or cares. He is a victim of opportunity.
Look at what he's wearing. He's definitely got some cash on him. Hey, whoa, what the hell, man? What are you doing? Don't worry. This guy's my voice. Wait, Rod, stop. Don't turn around. Whoa.
And Rodney McFarland is not Hispanic by any stretch of the imagination, but he used that accent to throw off the victim.
Keep your hands up and get on your knees. Come on, man. Okay. Now give me
It's an accidental discharge. McFarland is shocked that the gun goes off.
God, help me. Please.
No robbery is attempted. Now it's run away.
It wasn't his intent. It was an accident, but it was an accident committed in the course of a criminal episode, which still makes it a crime.
Rodney McFarland pleads guilty to attempted aggravated robbery and is sentenced to 10 years in prison. Chris Powell is cleared of all charges.
There is a happy ending to this story, because even though Donald had all these cards stacked against him, he survived. He went on to fully recover and happily marry and have children and grandchildren. That would give you a whole new perspective on life, I think.
Armed robbery is one of the only violent crimes where the victims are selected at random. In the case of Donald Zampa, what was his crime? Being in the wrong place at precisely the wrong moment. He's just a very lucky guy. He lived through it. Many don't.
It's getting late, and delivery man Kirk Farrell is making his last stop of the night.
Kirk Farrell is a convenience store delivery man. He goes in late nights to multiple stores, takes out the old products, bring in new products, and he hears two cars pull up. Hey! There's a sound of a disturbance, people yelling.
The voices are getting more raised and the situation is getting more tense. And all of a sudden, he hears a shot.
Stop! He starts to take cover behind his truck. And at that time, he hears a second gunshot.
I'm sure he was scared and very confused. It's not like he can just call 911. He's going to have to go back into the store to do that.
Within the hour, Lieutenant Joe Kenda pulls up to the scene of the city's 23rd homicide of the year.
In 1991, we had an exceptionally high number of homicides for the size of city at that time. This particular case was one short of a record of 24 set in 1974.
Hey, Lieutenant. Hey, Gary. So what do we got? We got one shooting victim, 21-year-old Todd Iverson. Kid was rushed to the hospital, but pronounced DOA. Any witnesses? Got a couple, actually, including the shooter. He's already in custody, and so's his gun. Really? Yeah, we got his friend over here in this cruiser.
It appears we have a major step up. We have the shooter, and we have the weapon.
All right, let's take a look at the scene.
We have a puddle of blood on the sidewalk in front of the main window of the store, which is apparently where this victim collapsed.
Toilet paper, huh?
Yeah, I got a T-shirt here, too.
Guy must have been hemorrhaging pretty bad.
Most likely, all of these items were used to stop the bleeding on the victim before medical arrived.
I got blood drops.
There is a pattern of blood moving toward the two cars in the lot.
Nice cars.
Yeah, our victim was a passenger in this car with his buddy, and our suspect was driving this car with a friend of his.
All right, I'm gonna take a look in the victim's car. Why don't you take the suspects?
You got it.
So you have two sports cars where speed and power are important. It speaks to the personality of the owner.
Is this something that could possibly lead to road rage? We've seen road rage be involved in a lot of deaths and a lot of murders. Not just accidental deaths where they crash, but one guy gets mad enough to where he actually shoots at another one. This wouldn't be the first time it's happened this year. We had another case in that same year where just that happened, a road rage incident, and a guy pulls a gun out and shoots somebody. So it's quite possible that these guys were either racing, got mad at one another, maybe one cut the other off, they're playing games with the cars. The idea of road rage really does come to play, or at least the thought of it does come up when we're starting this investigation. We don't know what's going on. There's a lot of possibilities.
Looking at the interior of the car, there's no evidentiary value, nothing covered in blood. It's most likely then that our victim is shot outside of his car.
Hey, Lieutenant, come take a look at this.
In the trunk, we find 41 expended casings neatly placed into an ammunition box.
What's the shooter's name? Scott Sneed. Well, Mr. Sneed obviously has experience with a gun.
It is not uncommon for people who routinely shoot. They recover their expended casings for purposes of reload.
Now check this out. Kid's on the Olympic Development Shooting Team. No kidding.
So Scott Sneed has an unusual skill in that he is a very good marksman. And he's involved in kind of a pre-Olympic program here.
This kid's probably a better shot than all of us. Yeah.
By the time they come out of that training program, they are scary good shots. Their rate of accuracy is just incredible.
So, Mr. Sneed is very good with a gun. If he is going to shoot you, he is going to kill you. And Mr. Iverson has discovered that the hard way.
Let's go see what he has to say.
My first impression of Mr. Sneed is he's a scrawny little kid. His identification says he's 18 years old. He looks like he's 12.
What were you and your buddy up to tonight?
Well, I mean, we were just out for a late movie, and we got hungry, and we knew that this was going to be the only place that was open.
He says they were just going to run in, grab some food, and head on home.
Man, I'm starving.
Me too.
Hey! That's a good... Yeah, what? Do I know? Whoa, hey, chill, bro. What's your problem? As soon as I opened this car door, this guy just rushed me out of nowhere. I had no choice. I had to defend myself.
Okay, do you know Todd Iverson? And why would he come at you like that?
I've got no clue. I've never seen that guy before in my life.
Okay.
The mere fact that Mr. Sneed reports that he doesn't even know this guy leaves an enormous shadow of doubt in his claim of self-defense. It is not common for perfect strangers to violently assault someone they don't know upon first contact.
Kenda wonders if Scott Sneed is trying to flip the script.
People shoot people deliberately and try to call self-defense. They lie about it.
Take him down the station.
Sir. Wait, am I going to jail for this?
I'll be done to talk to you later.
I didn't mean to hurt the guy, I swear, okay?
Why is it that Mr. Iverson is threatening Mr. Sneed if Mr. Sneed says he doesn't know Mr. Iverson? There has to be motivation. Somebody has to believe you're their enemy.
You want to talk to the kid who was in the car with Scott? No, let's send him down to the station. I'll talk to him later. He's probably just going to back up his friend's story anyhow. I want to talk to the kid that was in the victim's car.
Kenda is hoping Todd Iverson's friend can shed some light on what the issue between Scott and Todd was all about.
So what's your name, son?
Joe Fleming.
How old are you?
I am 17. How's Todd?
Well, I'm sorry to say he's not going to make it.
When I found out Todd died, it was a shock. Just couldn't believe it. It was unreal at that point.
And I know this is difficult, but can you tell us how you knew Todd?
Yeah, grew up together.
I met Todd in the neighborhood because I saw him riding by on a nice BMX bike. So I jumped on my bike and went out and got to talking from there and just hit it off.
But after Todd graduated, he moved to Arizona for trade school.
So what was he doing here now?
Just visiting. He got into town a few days ago.
Tonight we were just celebrating him being home.
We're all pretty excited to get all back together again and hang out. Our group of friends were just real tight.
Tonight was awesome, man. I really missed you guys.
We missed you too. I told Bob I was gonna convince you to stay for good this time.
You can try. Hey man, pull over right here. Let's get more beer.
Todd's the liquor source. He's 21. He can buy alcohol.
When we pulled in, I recognized the car in front of us. Hey, that's Sneed's car.
Oh, really? Let's get him.
I'm hungry, man.
Me too.
But that movie was really good. Yeah? Do I even know you? Oh, hey, chill out, bro. What's your... Hey.
Todd did throw a punch at Scott, but missed. Didn't hit him.
So what was the deal between Todd and Scott?
Todd?
Yeah, why did Todd hate Scott?
Todd, he doesn't even know Scott. I'm the one who hates Scott.
So we are thinking random act of violence doesn't make any sense. Well, now it makes sense. Now it makes perfect sense. We're investigating the death of 21-year-old Todd Iverson. We were skeptical when our suspect, Scott Sneed, said he didn't know Mr. Iverson, but maybe he really didn't know him. We need to rethink that.
So, Joe, you're the one who has a problem with Scott. What's it over?
Well, his girlfriend Nikki is best friends with my girlfriend, but he's no good to her.
Joe is not at all keen on how Scott treats his girlfriend.
The other night, he had Nikki crying, and my girlfriend calls him to tell him off.
My girlfriend was arguing with him over the phone, back and forth, and that's when I heard the threats.
He said he would kick my girlfriend's ass if she came between him and Nikki. I would have knocked him out had he said that in front of me.
Scott made me mad. I really didn't care for the way he treated his girlfriend and the way he was talking to mine.
At the root of all of this is the normal high school drama that goes on between boys and girls. It was nothing. Perception, believed slight, perceived bad behavior, all that sort of thing. That's all.
So if Scott's problem's with you, why did Todd go after him?
I mean, I told Todd about Scott and all that he had done. And I guess he had had a few beers.
Todd understood that Joe didn't like Scott. And he's probably the leader of this little clique and probably the enforcer should something go wrong.
He was jumping out to protect my honor.
So what happened when Todd got out of the car?
Todd took a swing at Scott, and I got out to defuse the situation.
At that point, Scott had already pulled out a handgun.
Hey, back off, bro.
Whoa! Dude, come on, let's go. Let's forget about it.
He fired a shot, went between us, which, you know, I backed off from there. I told Todd, come on, you know, let's not do this. But Todd stayed there.
I'm walking away. Next thing I know, I hear another gunshot. And now Todd's covered in blood.
At that moment, I was very upset. Did not have a reason to pull out a gun. Worst thing that probably would have happened that night was a little fight.
I understand how you feel. Thanks for your cooperation. Sorry about your friend.
Joe Fleming's story is eye-opening and ultimately lends credence to Scott Sneed's claim of self-defense.
Mr. Iverson is much bigger than Mr. Sneed. His size alone would strike fear into the heart of an 18-year-old kid.
However, there is still one issue keeping Kenda on the fence.
Now, a marksman like Scott's going to hit exactly what he aims for. And he shot him dead. I know. I think he would have shot him in a non-lethal area. And you know what? Maybe he did.
Where is this victim shot? It's a demonstration of intent.
As the sun rises, Kenda heads to the morgue in search of some answers.
So the bullet perforated his right lung. He died relatively quickly.
Okay, where was the entrance wound?
Well, that's what's interesting. The bullet entered at his right shoulder, hit the clavicle, ricocheted downward into the lung. See right here where it fractured the clavicle?
Yeah, that makes all the difference.
The shooter, in this case, a competitive, trained shooter, can make that bullet go anywhere. And yet he selects the upper right shoulder. It is mere accident that the bullet happened to strike the clavicle and ricochet, lacerating the lung and killing the guy. Had that round been a half-inch lower or a half-inch higher, it would have been an entry-exit gunshot wound, treatable with the Band-Aids.
So Scott was intentionally trying not to kill him. All right, thanks, Doc.
Yeah, good luck, man.
Kenda now wants to talk with Scott to see if his story does in fact line up with what he's just learned.
I want to talk to Scott some more about precisely what he did when he decided to level that weapon at his opponent. That's the key to this case. That's the key.
How you doing, Scott?
Not so good. That guy died?
Yeah, he did. Scott, do you know where you shot Todd?
Well, I was aiming for his shoulder, but I mean, if he died, then... What, did I miss? I mean, it's like I told you before, I didn't mean to kill anybody, I swear.
I believe you, Scott. And no, you didn't miss.
He aims for a non-vital area. He hits what he's shooting at, but more importantly, he only fires one shot. He's not out of control. He's not emptying the gun into this guy. He is trying to stop his advance.
At this point, Kenda has a clear picture of what happened that night.
Two cars, by fate, by karma, by whatever means, show up in the same place at the same time. Mr. Iverson, at this point in his life, had enough alcohol in him to provide him with a motive to demonstrate his machismo. Oh yeah? That's the guy that did that? Well, I'm gonna teach that boy a lesson.
Hey! Can I help you?
Todd tries to strike you. He actually misses.
Hey, chill out, bro. What's your problem? Hey, you want something? Hey, Todd, get off me, bro. Hey, back up, bro. Hey, what are you gonna do with that, huh? What are you gonna do? Back up!
Scott, in fear of his own personal safety, fires a warning shot to try to tell Todd to back off and stop.
Mr. Iverson, the victim, ignores. He continues his behavior.
Back up, man. Just forget about it. He's not gonna shoot me. Stop!
Mr. Sneed pulls up that gun and puts one in his right shoulder. It hits a bone and it ricochets exactly the wrong direction and cuts his lung in half and kills him.
You didn't give me a choice, man. You didn't give me a choice, man. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Come on, man. Come on. It's gonna be all right. It's gonna be all right. Hey, here. Go. Don't close your eyes. Wake up. Come on, go get something. This is not gonna be enough.
He did take his shirt off and throw it towards me.
Here.
Scott had a noble reaction. He really was trying to do what he could to undo what he'd just done.
He's not dancing with joy that he has shot his enemy. That certainly speaks volumes about Mr. Sneed's intent.
I can't believe I killed him. So what's gonna happen to me?
Well, we're gonna have to figure that out.
Scott Sneed is charged with manslaughter. But when the district attorney takes the case to a grand jury, they come to a different conclusion.
The grand jury comes back indicating that they did not feel that Scott acted in a criminal manner, but he acted in self-defense. So all charges were dropped.
Unfortunately for Scott, he couldn't overcome the magnitude of what happened that fateful night.
Mr. Sneed, as it turned out, at the age of 26, committed suicide as a result of depression.
Scott Sneed apparently was a very genuine young man. That's not to say he was perfect, but when he knew he had injured someone with his gun much more seriously than he ever intended to, he went to great lengths to try to help the young man, to help Todd, who was bleeding profusely. His conscience drove him then, and his conscience indeed might have driven him to his death, because even though the law called the homicide justifiable, he struggled with the death that he knew he committed. He shut down all of his practices. He shut down his dreams and his hopes to be a marksman. He was trying to punish himself, even perhaps, to take away something in his own life to somehow feel a little bit better about the horrible thing he did. He obviously was not able to succeed in getting past what he saw as such a horror at his own hand. Scott Sneed had a very strong conscience, and that conscience seemed to never let him go. I am sure that year after year he tried to put that remorse behind him, but that one horrible, bloody night took it all away from him. He became demoralized in the years after that shooting. And as a result of that, he also became very, very depressed. And it's quite likely that in an attempt to end all that, to rid himself of his emotional pain, took his own life.
It really is tragic that Todd didn't make it. It was also tragic for Scott. And, you know, a tiny bit of luck could have changed this so much.
If I had to do it over again, I probably just would have said, keep your eye on or something. Keep him around. He didn't have a chance to get married, have kids, you know, do the things that we're all doing now.
It's very sad, but it is what people do. And guys like me are forced to pick up the pieces, as it were, and sweep up the crime scene and turn to the rest of the public and say, next, because there's going to be a next.
It started with a frozen silence. January 13th, 2001. A night when the wind scraped across the coast of Kennebec County, cutting through the pine forest like glass. Snow covered everything except a single dirt road leading to an abandoned farmhouse. That's where the first call came in. A driver saw something unusual. A car door wide open, engine still running, headlights facing the woods. No one inside, just footprints disappearing into the darkness. When deputies arrived, they found a set of keys dangling from the ignition, a purse in the passenger seat, and a cell phone still glowing with a missed call from Mom. The missing person was a 27-year-old woman named Hannah Bishop, a nurse from Augusta, last seen leaving a late shift at the regional hospital. She had texted her mother minutes before, "On my way home." Then, nothing. No response. No trace. The snow fell heavier that night, erasing the footprints by morning. What began as a routine missing person report turned into one of Maine's longest unsolved mysteries. The search stretched for days, then weeks. Helicopters scanned the woods. Dogs traced her scent to a frozen riverbank before losing it. Detectives interviewed co-workers, neighbors, her boyfriend. No one had seen her. No one had heard anything. The only clue, a broken watch found 50 yards from the car, still ticking at 11:42 p.m. Investigators marked it as the probable time of disappearance. The case file swelled with dead ends. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said she'd run away. Others whispered about a stalker from her hospital days. Every January after that, the same headline reappeared in the local paper. Still no answers in Bishop disappearance. Her parents never moved. They kept her room untouched, curtains drawn, as if time itself refused to move forward. By 2002, leads had dried up completely. The sheriff's department quietly shelved the case, but in a town like Augusta, memory doesn't fade, it curdles. Old friends remembered Hannah's laugh, her habit of driving too fast down Route 201, her kindness. A retired deputy named Frank Morrissey couldn't let it go. He'd seen too many cases go cold, too many families left with questions. He began revisiting the file every winter just to read through the reports, to remind himself of what was missing. One note caught his eye years later. A truck spotted near the farmhouse that night, older model, dark green, no plates visible. At the time, it seemed irrelevant, a snowplow driver perhaps, but Morrissey couldn't shake it. 2 decades later, in 2021, technology had changed everything. Old evidence could talk again, DNA testing, digital enhancement, databases that connected across states. A new task force reopened the file under the codename Northfield, focusing on a single fragment of evidence, a hair found on Hannah's scarf, originally dismissed as contamination. When analyzed again, it produced a partial DNA profile. The results matched someone unexpected, Thomas Keene, a local mechanic who had lived less than 5 miles from where Hannah vanished. Keene had no criminal record, no apparent link to her, and had died in 2015. But when investigators dug deeper, a darker pattern emerged. Keene's garage records showed late-night repairs on vehicles with fake registration numbers, and his property sat adjacent to a stretch of forest long rumored to hide illegal dumping sites. Forensic teams combed the area behind his house. What they found stunned even veteran officers. Fragments of fabric consistent with nurse scrubs, a silver bracelet engraved HB, and buried beneath layers of pine needles and ice, the remnants of human bone. The remains were confirmed as Hannah's. 20 years gone, less than 10 miles from her car. The discovery hit Maine like a thunderclap. News stations called it the cold case that refused to die. But the strangest detail came from the evidence log. Inside Keene's workshop, tucked in a rusted toolbox, was a cassette tape labeled Jan 13 HB. When technicians restored it, a voice could be heard faintly, male, agitated, arguing with a woman. The sound of a struggle, then silence. The recording lasted 12 minutes. It ended with the hum of an engine and a door slamming shut. Detectives believed Keene had recorded his confrontation with Hannah, perhaps to blackmail her, perhaps out of compulsion. No one could be sure. The case seemed solved on paper. The man was dead. The remains found. The motive unclear, but the evidence overwhelming. Yet something about the story still felt unfinished. Why was Hannah on that road? Why had Keene targeted her? Investigators re-examined her phone records from that night. One number stood out. A landline registered to a company that didn't exist. When traced, it led to an abandoned property once owned by Keene's older brother Martin, who had disappeared in 2002, leaving behind only unpaid taxes and a single utility bill. The date of that last payment, January 12, 2001. Suddenly the story widened. The brothers had shared more than blood. They shared secrets. Former employees from the local auto shop recalled strange deliveries late at night. Barrels unloaded by flashlight, hushed arguments, the smell of oil and bleach. Rumors resurfaced about stolen car parts, underground trade, maybe worse. One neighbor remembered hearing screams one winter night but thought it was the wind. In small towns, people learned to look away. As the cold case unit pieced it together, a disturbing theory formed. Hannah might have witnessed something, a transaction, an argument, a moment she wasn't supposed to see. She could have recognized one of the Keene brothers from the hospital or from her commute. Whatever it was, it put her in danger. The broken watch, the open car door, the footprints, everything pointed to a sudden confrontation, not a planned abduction. In late 2023, a final report concluded that Thomas Keene acted alone, but those who studied the tape heard 2 male voices overlapping during the struggle. 2 sets of footsteps. The official statement ignored that. The family didn't. They believed Martin was there too, somewhere in the woods that night. His body was never found. The case was declared solved, but not everyone agreed. On the 20th anniversary of her disappearance, candlelight vigils lined the frozen river, the same spot where the dogs had stopped all those years ago. Reporters described the ceremony as quiet, intimate, but one photo captured something uncanny. A man standing apart from the crowd, face hidden beneath a hood, watching. No one recognized him. By the time someone turned to ask, he was gone. The Bishop case had finally closed. The files were stamped, the evidence sealed, the remains laid to rest. Yet the questions hung in the air, like frost that refuses to melt. Why record a murder? Why keep the tape? And if Keene was truly alone, whose shadow moved across the microphone at the end of that 12-minute recording? The sound engineers couldn't identify it. Just a faint breath, a whisper that, when slowed down, sounded eerily like a name. Marty. Even after 20 years, Maine still remembers that night when the snow fell heavier, the wind howled louder, and a small town learned that silence can hold more than sorrow. It can hold secrets. And sometimes when the cold finally cracks, those secrets don't die, they speak. The second call that winter did not come from a witness or a cop. It came from the river. The Kennebec had thawed just enough to release what it had been holding for years, a thin ribbon of current licking away at old ice, pulling loose a metal lockbox that knocked itself against a piling under the East Bridge. A teenager fishing with his grandfather spotted it at dusk, the water bruised purple and the town lights turning on one by one. He climbed down the embankment, slipped, cursed, hauled the box up by its rusted handle, and felt the icy weight of secrets. He pried at it with a screwdriver from his tackle kit. It popped open with a breath like a coffin opening in a stale room. Inside was a cassette deck wrapped in a grocery bag, a strip of undeveloped film, and a folded map of the county with a route drawn in red pen. The boy did not understand what he had found, but his grandfather did. He had lived through the first winter. He had watched the candles. He kept his voice even and said, "We are taking this to the sheriff right now." The lockbox arrived at the evidence room before the night shift coffee had brewed. The deputies felt the same draw that everyone felt when the Bishop file came back to life. A hush, the sense that the case could breathe again. The deck was corroded but repairable. The film could be saved. The map was the first thing they laid flat under glass. The route did not point to the farmhouse. It curved around it. It avoided the road where Hannah's car had been found. It started at the regional hospital parking lot and then cut behind a row of storage units, crossed a logging road, skirted a gravel pit, and ended in an unmarked clearing written in block letters as Spot A. No date, no signature, just that trail of red. The new task force captain brought in the same audio techs who had restored the 12-minute tape from the toolbox. They cleaned the cassette deck with soft brushes and patience, swapped the belts, sealed the deck in a plastic tent to keep dust out, and fed the tape forward at half speed. The room filled with that same cold hum that people in Maine recognize without thinking. Winter wind through trees. Somewhere in the first minute a voice whispered the word ready, not Thomas. Not the voice they had cataloged. A little older, drier, like a man who kept long silences as a habit. The second voice said not tonight. The first said she has to listen. The tape cracked with the sound of a door, metal on metal, a hinge that had eaten too many storms. Then footsteps, gravel, the click of a flashlight. The voices moved away. No argument this time, no panic, clinical. The engineers watched the waveforms roll by like shoreline, a scratchy shuffle, a trunk opening, a muffled sentence that turned to steam and vanished. Then nothing. 3 minutes of river wind. The techs leaned in and caught a final detail that did not fit. A truck door creaked closed and the tape snapped off mid-breath as if a finger had punched the stop button on purpose. The film went out to the lab. The map went out to volunteers. On the third day after the lockbox appeared, snow started again. It fell quietly, like the town had decided to speak in the only way it trusted. The team followed the red route when the flakes were light enough to see the ground. They walked in a single line like penitents. They passed the storage units. The manager came out in a hat with ear flaps and asked if this was about the news. He remembered a man with a dark green truck and a paper receipt with the name Keen on it. He remembered cash. He remembered the man never looked up. The unit number had been rented for 2 months in the winter of 2000 to 2001. No forwarding address. The lock was cut by court order. Inside they found shelving, 3 empty oil drums, a plastic cooler with no smell, and a wall calendar stuck surprisingly to June 1998, as if time had paused there and refused to go forward. There was nothing else, not even dust worth taking. But a single screw on the concrete floor had a smear of something that reacted under blue light. The forensics team leaned down with their cotton swabs and their patience and took what they could. It would be weeks before the lab called back, but when they did, the answer would be a small hinge in a larger door. The route continued. It traced the logging road like a red artery. The deputy in the lead raised a palm and everyone stopped. He had found something that did not belong to Snow and Pine. Glass, ground into the dirt, a headlight lens shard. Then another, a scatter of safety glass glittering like a false constellation. Someone had smashed a light here and then driven anyway. The clearing called Spot A was not far. You could smell the gravel pit before you saw it, that dry, chalky breath of stone. The red pen line ended in a loop like a noose. There was nothing in the clearing except wind and a stand of birches and a slit trench with a rotted board over it. The board came away soft as cake. Underneath lay old earth. The team scraped gently, then with trowels, then with brushes. They found fabric first. A triangle of blue that looked like scrub material bleached by seasons. They found a button that matched the brand the hospital used in 2001. They found a plastic clip that could have been from a nurse badge. They kept their faces blank because the forest watched. When they had enough to justify equipment, they brought in the ground radar that speaks in pale ghosts. The machine stuttered, paused, drew a thin shadow under the birches like a second line of roots. The shovel went in slow. The air cooled in the lungs of men who rarely believed in omens. What came up was not a body but a burlap sack stitched closed with baling twine. Inside, a tape case. It was empty. Evidence of absence passing itself off as proof. Someone had taken the reel and left the container here as if to point a finger at an empty chair. The lab results on the storage unit smear landed like a dropped coin. It was oil cut with ethanol and something else that had a signature they could match to a specific kind of brake cleaner sold in 2 stores in the county during a very narrow window. Receipts narrowed from hundreds to 3. One receipt had a handwriting sample they could test. The name on the slip was not Thomas. It was Martin, the older brother, the one who had dissolved into rumor and wind. Now he had left a scratch on paper, a date, a time, a cashier stamp, proof that he was moving through town when everyone thought he was gone. The documentary line straightened. The two voices on tape had not been wishful thinking. They had been inventory. In small towns, people remember cars more than faces. The green truck was a 1989 Ford with a dent on the passenger side and an aftermarket plow mount. That detail mattered because only a few mechanics in the county installed that particular mount in that particular year. The list drew down to one garage, Keen's. The owner was dead, but the ledgers were not. They told the truth as numbers do when no one thinks to lie on their behalf. A page from December 2000 showed a cash job for a plow mount annotated with the letters MK. A second page 1 month later carried the words replace headlight left. The glass scattered by the logging road stood up on its hind legs and called its own name. The town tried to keep its balance. Parents who had been teenagers during the first search were now middle-aged. They dragged old feelings up like nets heavy with silt. The grocery store line hummed with the same gossip as before, but softer, more careful, as if the walls had learned to listen. Old men at the diner said they had known the brothers were trouble. They had said it then, they said it now. It changed nothing. Hannah's mother spoke only once on the record. She said the river keeps what it wants until it does not. She said the lockbox came up when it was ready and not before. She said she woke from a dream the night before it was found and felt someone touch her shoulder and say it is time. The captain did not put that in his report, but he underlined the word time a few times anyway. The undeveloped strip finally bloomed in the lab bath. 4 frames came up, night shots flashed too hot. A pickup bed with a tarp, a glove on gravel, a flashlight in a mouth while 2 hands did something precise and ugly. The 4th frame caught a reflection in a truck mirror, not a face, a scar at the jawline shaped like a hook. The barber on Water Street remembered the man with the scar because he had cut him twice and the customer always angled his head away from the mirror like he hated his reflection. The barber gave a name he could not swear to, but he gave a nickname that stuck. Hook. The task force passed that nickname quietly among themselves like a poisonous insect in a jar. You do not release it into the town air until you are ready. They looked back into old traffic stops, old tickets, old petty things that grow teeth when the light changes. A state trooper in 2001 had pulled over a green truck for a bad headlight on a road not far from the logging turnoff. The trooper had written in his narrative that the driver shifted his jaw in an odd way, maybe a nervous habit, and refused to step into the cruiser light, and the trooper let him go with a warning because snow was coming and the radio was busy. The name on the paper was smudged, but the address was not. It led to a low house with aluminum siding and a shed that had fallen in on itself years ago. No one lived there now. The property belonged to a bank, and a bank belongs to no one who can answer a door. They went in anyway. The shed smelled like mildew and old rope. The floor had 6 boards that did not match the rest. Under the boards a space, under the space a cooler, and in the cooler a reel of tape sealed in wax. The sound this time was not wind. It was a man whistling tunelessly while he worked. His breath was steady. He said nothing. Keys jingled. The truck engine choked, then caught. A second engine turned over. 2 vehicles. 2 men. The whistle stopped. The tape hissed. There was movement that did not fit a single pair of hands. When the hiss ended, someone's finger hit stop, and then, after a beat, hit record again, as if forgetting to quit the habit. The last thing on the reel was a single word spoken softly, not a name, an instruction. Burn. The forensic arson specialist on the team ran a list of fires in winter 2001 that had been written off as electrical or careless. 3 had been within 10 miles of the route. 1 had been on a property line between the Keene place and an empty patch of county land. The ash there still held chemical ghosts if you believed in persistence. The specialist did. He took soil. He came back with a match to accelerant. He came back with a pattern that suggested a long trough, not a random spill. He came back with a shape that looked like a shallow trench with flames walking across it to wipe something from the world. The old deputy who had never let go, Morrissey, watched the younger men work and kept his voice folded. He had chased these brothers in his head for years, and now there they were, not as monsters, but as men who learned to hide in plain winter. He drove home at night down the same roads and looked in his rearview mirror too long and told himself no one was there. The narrative of the case was supposed to be simple now. The state would write a line that said the suspect acted alone and close the folder again because finality looks clean on a podium. But the tape said otherwise, and the map said otherwise, and the reflection in the mirror said otherwise. The captain wrote an addendum to the final report that did not accuse and did not absolve. It simply documented. 2 voices, 2 engines, 1 route that avoided the found car like a choreographed dance. He sent it up the chain and watched it return stamped as received and marked with the word noted. In small towns, justice is not a gavel. It is a feeling that settles or does not. The vigil that year doubled. People who had not come before came now. They lit candles, and the wind did what it always does and bent the flames, but did not kill them. A hooded man stood apart and left early. Someone watched him go and did not follow. A journalist who had been a cub in 2001 and now had gray at the temples stood at the river and spoke quietly into a camera about closure that did not close. He said the case had been solved by death since the man named could not answer, but the community had to live with a second name that no one would write down. He said snow covers tracks, but not memory. He said the lockbox came up because the river was done. He clicked off the camera and stood there a while and listened to the ice shift and thought maybe the town needed to hear not that it was over, but that it could rest in the knowing that some things will never fully return to shore. The tape went back into the evidence vault. The map stayed pinned on the wall of the task force room like an anatomy of winter. They would follow it again when the thaw came because silence sometimes gives back a little more each season. And somewhere under the birches, a thread remained, a nail, a scrap, a whisper in magnetic rust. The brother with the scar had not vanished into legend. He had left his shape in the county, and the county was learning to trace it. The voiceover of a town does not stop. It keeps talking as plows rumble and doors shut and dogs bark along the riverbank after dark at nothing that can be named. The case is solved. The tape says otherwise. The night says otherwise. The wind lifts and the birches click their dry fingers together, as if counting, as if rehearsing, as if telling you that not every name goes quiet when the snow closes over it, and that sometimes the river keeps a second lockbox in its pocket, waiting for the right pair of hands to feel for it in the dark. The third winter after the lockbox surfaced, the town began to act like it could breathe again, but only in short, cautious inhales, the way someone tests air in a room that used to hold smoke. The task force room kept its lights low to spare tired eyes. The map was still on the wall, red route still looping like a snare around spot A, and beneath it a row of photographs that functioned like a chorus, repeating without words what everyone knew. 2 voices on tape, 2 engines in the dark, a reflection in a mirror that offered only a scar shaped like a hook. The captain rotated the photographs when the glass reflected glare. He said fresh angles helped the brain see the same facts as new. He was not wrong. A rookie noticed something the veterans had folded into the wallpaper. On the undeveloped strip's second frame, beyond the overexposed bed of the pickup and the tarp, there was a ghostly streak in the distance like a second beam of light, not lens flare. A headlight from another vehicle parked without its engine noise bleeding into the audio. That meant one of the engines we heard on the reel belonged to a truck not in the foreground. Its driver half hidden, his breath not on the microphone, his rhythm not recorded the way Thomas's was. The lab brushed the frame with software as careful as a conservator dusting an old fresco. The streak resolved to a half-moon arc of a lamp and a sliver of grill. Not Ford, not Chevy. A Dodge, late 90s. There were 3 registered in a radius of 5 miles from the clearing that winter. One belonged to a traveling electrician who lived out of county by spring. One belonged to a farmer whose wife's calendar and checkbook proved he was hauling feed at the hour they needed him to be elsewhere. The third was a ghost on paper. Registered to a P.O. box, insured for 6 months, never inspected, never ticketed, never photographed by any traffic camera because there weren't any on those roads in 2001. The P.O. box was opened by a man with a baseball cap and a habit of keeping his head tilted below the surveillance camera. The postal clerk remembered only that the man smelled of solvent and wintergreen. The clerk said he signed the forms with his left hand and left quickly. The signature was a loop and a slash. The loop could be an M. The slash could be nothing or everything. The captain stared at the form under magnification and said out loud what no one wanted to say too early. Martin learned to write like a ghost. The rookie brought coffee in paper cups, and nobody drank it because their mouths had gone dry. They had always suspected the second brother. Now the paper gave them permission. That permission opened doors that had stayed politely shut. A retired trooper came forward with a memory from a midnight decades old, a roadside assist that wasn't. A truck idling on a logging spur with its hazard lights stuttering like a heartbeat. He said a man with a jaw that worked side to side like he was crushing pain behind his teeth waved him off, said friends were coming, said he was fine, said the words without looking directly at the trooper's eyes. The trooper wrote down the spur road name out of habit when he got back to the barracks and filed the note under MISC. The date matched the week of the disappearance. The spur lay 2 miles past Spot A. The captain took the note like it was a fossil you could bruise with breath. He sent a pair of deputies with a metal detector and a promise to dig until the day gave out. The forest was a slow teacher. It gave them a belt buckle first, plain, cheap, stamped with a maker's mark, sold at a hardware store that changed owners 3 times since. Then it gave them a felt cap button that might have belonged to anyone in 100 winters. The deputies kept walking the coil across the frozen ground until the tone changed to a thin insistence. 6 inches down, a ring of keys clicked against the shovel. The key ring bore a flattened oval charm with an etched initial, not H, not K. An M nicked by time. 2 of the keys were for a brand of storage lock used at the units by the road the P.O. box listed. The captain called the manager with the earflap hat. He asked if any unit from that era had never returned a key on closeout because sometimes people abandon locks like they abandon stories. The manager said Unit 117 had required a bolt cutter when the renter stopped paying. The ledger noted a cash deposit, a refund check that came back undeliverable, and a scribble in the margin. Scarjaw. The manager said he wrote that to remember a face. He had not known it would matter. The captain put the ledger on the table next to the reels and the frames and the map and the keys. He did not smile. He did not say solved. He said track. They ran the keys through a digital impression reader, found the factory cuts, matched them to a brand of padlock that had been popular with small-town renters because it looked tougher than it was. They found the distributor who had supplied the hardware store in 2000, the old owner of the store, now in Florida with the kind of tan that looks like a new skin, answered the phone and blessed himself 3 times while he talked because he had sold an extra lock that winter to a man who did not like to be looked at while he counted bills. The old owner said the man had a scar that hooked his jaw into a question mark. The town's barber had said the same. 2 points make a line, 3 points make a road. They had a road now, and it led in the direction everyone had been walking since the lockbox clanged against the piling. The tapes became their own weather. The audio techs ran spectral analysis to build a fingerprint of the 2 voices that winter nights had hidden. The first voice, the one catalogued as Thomas, carried a thermal shape like breath turned to frost near the mic, consonants hitting with a soft roll as if the tongue wanted to cushion everything it said. The second voice, older, drier, sat farther back in the frequency range, fricatives frayed, the timbre marked by a slight buzz that the text traced not to the tape but to the throat itself. Perhaps an old injury, perhaps smoking done too hard for too long. They overlaid the second voice with recordings from department interviews in 2001 of known associates of the Keens, a parts supplier, a neighbor, a man who collected junk cars for scrap, none matched. Then a public access TV clip surfaced from a fall county fair, a handheld camera panning past a row of grills and raffle tables and stopping too long on a tire-changing demonstration run by the Keen Garage to raise goodwill. A man off camera called out instructions while another worked the iron. The voice was sandpaper rubbed slow across wood. The off-camera man laughed once without humor and said, "Not like that." The camera jerked toward him and landed on a man turning his jaw away, his left side to the lens, a thin white line pulling at the corner of his mouth. The text froze the frame and circled the scar. They dropped the audio into their software and watched the bands bloom on the screen like a bruise. The pattern matched the second voice on the cassette within a probability that made the captain breathe once through his nose and close his eyes. The fair had been September 2000. The date wrote itself into the story like a finger into damp ash. Martin had not vanished in 2002. He had been visible, in daylight, telling a crowd how to take a tire off a wheel fast. Evidence rarely changes human nature. It only gives it borderlines. People who had held their tongues started to talk, not because they trusted police more than before, but because the wind had shifted toward truth. A woman who ran the laundromat said 2 brothers used to wash heavy canvas in the last machines on the left late at night. She remembered because they brought their own bleach and the smell burned her eyes from the back office. She said once when she emptied lint trays in the morning, she found a hospital ID clip. She had thrown it away because everything in the tray looked like trash. She watched the captain's mouth press into a thin line when she said that. She said she had prayed after. She said she still did. The captain thanked her. He said it mattered that she spoke now. He meant it and he didn't. He needed more than prayers. He needed a hinge, the kind that turns a wall into a door. The hinge arrived in a green envelope mailed without return address to the paper because a coward or a conscience had decided to speak at a safe distance. Inside, a single photograph on glossy stock, printed from an old film negative like the ones in the lockbox. The picture caught a pair of footprints moving away from a truck bed toward trees, one set deeper on the left side as if the man favored his right leg or carried a weight on his left shoulder. Beside the prints, a cigarette butt with a paper filter twisted down like a stubbed prayer. On the back of the photograph, in block letters, "Check the ditch country line road after the thaw." No one recognized the printing. The captain sent a deputy to stake the ditch with a numbered flag. Snow held the secret like it always did, tight-fisted and silent. When the thaw came, the ditch let go of a melted cigarette butt waterlogged enough to be useless for DNA, but still bearing a brand that the town's one gas station sold in a carton a week to a man who refused receipts. The clerk said the man used his left hand to sign the credit slip when he did pay, and he signed with a loop and a slash. The town watched the dance from behind curtains. On Sunday mornings, the prayers grew specific. On weeknights, old men in the diner rolled their cups between their palms and said, "This is what happens when you look away too long at the wrong men." But the old men had looked away too, and they knew it, and their voices dulled at their own admission. Hannah's father stood one morning in the doorway of his house and said to the sky without shouting that he would like to speak to Martin directly, and that if Martin could hear him wherever he had gone, he should know that the world had not swallowed him clean, that the world regurgitates what it cannot carry. The captain did not hear that speech. The wind did. In April, the ground released a set of bones not human near the trench site, a deer ribcage tangled with baling twine. Hunters tie bones to trees to bait coyotes. Hunters leave twine everywhere. The forensic anthropologist shrugged and said nature does not curate, but buried under the pile, pressed into mud that remembered weight, lay a circle of blackened metal that had once been a watchback. The number inside was legible enough to call the manufacturer and trace the model to a run sold regionally in late 2000. The watch face itself had broken off in snow by the roadside years ago, found ticking at 11:42 p.m., placed on a shelf in the evidence room like an orphaned heart. Two halves recognized each other across time the way magnets do, the way grief does, and clicked shut in everyone's imagination with a sound no one could actually hear. The captain wrote the serial number into the addendum and underlined it twice. A small thing, an old thing, but the world loves a circle. The state attorney called twice that month to suggest quietly that the file did not need more pages to qualify as closure. The captain listened without interrupting. He hung up and walked to the window and watched a plow idle in the lot even though there was no snow because the driver liked the sound of his engine and did not want to go home yet. The captain thought about engines we hear and engines we miss. He thought about two voices, one shadow, one scar, one habit of writing left-handed so your name looks like someone else's. He thought about how the audio reel ended twice because a finger could not break the practice of pressing stop, then record again, as if muscle memory testifies when conscience will not. He wrote one more line in a pen that dragged slightly on the cheap paper. Community impact ongoing. It was not poetic, it was true. Night retains heat from words longer than day. The vigil drew light again to the riverbank when the date circled back on the calendar. This time, a woman arrived who had not been seen before, hair close-cropped under a knit cap, eyes steady the way people who have known storms keep their eyes. She stood apart until the candles were lit, then stepped forward and placed on the railing a cassette tape still in its cracked plastic case, no label, no initials. The captain approached slow, like you approach a stray dog that wants help but distrusts hands. He asked the woman if she wanted to say anything. She said no, that the tape had been sitting in a drawer since a winter when certain men rented a room above her garage and paid cash and smoked in their sleep and kept the radio on all night to cover their whispers. She had kept the tape because it had fallen behind a dresser when they moved out, and she didn't clean like she used to. She kept it because some part of her thought there would be a day like this. She said she was sorry. The captain told her she had nothing to be sorry for. He meant it, and he didn't, because sorrow spreads like dye and stains everyone who touches the water. Back in the lab, the tape unspooled its ghosts with less hiss than the others, as if it had been waiting in still air for its turn to speak clearly. A voice, not Thomas, not the fairground voice, counted numbers under its breath, 2, 3, 5, the count a mechanic makes when tightening lug nuts in a star pattern so the wheel seats true. Then another voice, the older one, said, "Burn it after, soft as lint." The first voice said, "You said that last time." Silence ate a second. Then a noise like a lighter failing and a laugh that did not open the lungs. The older voice said, "It's snowing," and the younger said, "Good." And the tape clicked as if a thumb had checked the machine, and the river of night flowed through the speakers again. The text leaned back with the hollow hunger of people who have been fed only pieces and told to be full. The captain carried that hunger home and set it on his kitchen table like a place setting for a guest who never arrives. Morrissey, the old deputy, knocked at 9 because cops who retire never truly forget what a knock means. He had a folder under his arm and a look like a man who finally found the end of a thread and didn't trust his fingers to hold it. Inside the folder, a photograph from 2002 of a burnt-out shed on county land no one had claimed, the same shed where the reel and wax had been sleeping years later. In the corner of the photograph, 2 sets of prints in ash moving opposite directions, one set straight, deliberate, the other grinding deeper with each step, a man favoring one leg. Morrissey had circled the deeper track back then and written "older" in the margin, and no one had chased the question because the folder had been boxed when budgets cut into hours. He laid the picture beside the map, and the captain did not say a word. He did not need to. The paper had started to agree with itself across years. Stories do that when they are ready to end or refuse to, when they decide what they will leave you with. The captain thought of the word "burn" spoken like instruction, and the habit of tapes to record absence as eloquently as presence. He thought of two men speaking in the language of work, of routines turned into alibis, of a town that learned to count engines by sound and men by shadows. Spring would come, the ditch would dry, the county line road would cough up a new small thing, a washer, a zip tie hardened by cold, a fragment of a badge clip scarred by teeth. The town would read about additional corroborating evidence in a paragraph that most would skip because they had cooked supper and needed to sleep. But in some houses, the radio would stay on low and people would listen to static just to make sure silence had not swallowed the only voice that had ever told them the truth. That "solved" is a word that fits on a press release and not always on a heart. The captain locked the tape in the vault and turned out the lab light and stood in the corridor long enough to hear his own breath slow down. He said to no one that they would find the second truck when the thaw pulled the last nails from the old boards by Spot A, that a grill waits for sun the way bones wait for apology. He said it softly because the building keeps secrets too, and because the night was listening, and because somewhere a man with a scar was still a fact the county had not put in the ground. The thaw came late and mean, peeling the county like old tape, leaving behind seams of mud that swallowed boots and patience. The task force walked anyway. They followed the ditch markers that had stood like tiny prayer flags all winter along Country Line Road. The number 3 flag leaned as if tired of the job. A deputy righted it and saw the glint at its base, half coin, half tooth, a curve of chrome with a stamped letter embedded in silt. He rinsed it in a bottle cap, and the letter rose up, D, not a rank, not a name. A badge from a grill torn off by force, the kind of thing that stays stuck in a ditch for decades until spring decides to tell the truth. The captain cupped the chrome in his palm like heat. Dodge, late 90s, the ghost truck had just put a fingertip through the wall. They swept the ditch with magnets and patience and found a second sliver, then a third, a scatter pattern that matched a bumper torn against stone and dragged a few feet before the driver cursed, reversed, and left the pieces like breadcrumbs for a future he did not believe in. They followed the scatter to a culvert choked with old leaves, pried the grate, and reached into black water that smelled of iron and time, and hauled up a license plate twisted into a shape like a question. The numbers were not legible. The state lab could read what the eye could not. The captain didn't smile. He just said, "Keep going." The culvert coughed again and gave them a bolt stamped with a part number that belonged to a specific year, the map on the wall in the task force room tilted toward completion without moving. At the county impound, in the corner where forgotten things sleep, an old wrecker operator with tar on his hands remembered a winter pickup that had come in without papers, cash paid for storage by a man who stopped paying after 2 months and never returned. The wrecker scratched at his jaw the way men do when they're trying to pull out a splinter of memory. He said the truck had a front end that looked like it had kissed a rock. He said the grill had been missing a badge. He said if anyone wanted to check the back lot, the frame might still be there under a blue tarp that had turned the color of fatigue. The back lot had 3 tarps. The second plastic sheet flapped, tore, and let the light in on a row of bones that had once been a Dodge. The frame number was a gate to a file, and the file said the truck had been registered to a P.O. box that belonged to nobody and everyone. The receipt for storage was signed with a loop and a slash. The captain held the paper and laid it reverb side down on the evidence table like it could still sing. What had been rumor was now road. The second engine on the tapes had a body. It had sat within reach the whole time, disguised by neglect the way small towns hide secrets in plain sight and call it clutter. They photographed the frame like a crime scene because it was one slow murder of detail over years. Under the bed rails, they found tar paper fused to rust, a layer that had once kept weather out but now held weather in. Under the tar paper, wedged near a weld, a flake of paint the same blue as a hospital badge clip. The lab would tell them it was coincidence if they tested too soon. They waited. They built the circle first. Hannah's watch back and face had recognized each other across 2 decades. Now her last known corridor moved toward them too. A clerk at the regional hospital, long retired and living in a small apartment with windows that made the morning look clean, brought in a VHS tape she'd kept by accident and then on purpose. The hospital had recorded over tapes when budgets thinned. She had asked to keep one for training years later. She had labeled it Late Shift Parking 1001 in a hand that had not shaken yet. She told the captain she didn't know why she had done it, just that some part of her had thought the machine would erase something human if she let it. They threaded the tape through a player that groaned like an old dog standing. The image bled black at the edges. A snow-fogged camera stared at a lot with cheap sodium lights that turned everything the color of a bruise. 11:27 p.m. Hannah appeared at the top of the frame as a bright streak, then a person, then a woman in a long coat moving with the energy of someone who believes home is 10 minutes away. She looked over her left shoulder once, casual, a glance you could miss. At the edge of the lot, a pair of headlights flashed twice, not high beams. A hello, her head tilted. She walked to her car without breaking pace. She unlocked it. She put something in the passenger seat. A second car sat 3 rows back, engine off, no lights, a shape that could be anything until a snow swirl passed and the truck's profile briefly cut the storm like a negative. Tall hood, squared fenders, Dodge. The camera skipped frames in the cold. In the gap between flickers, Hannah's car had backed out. In the next flicker, the truck had turned. In the next, they were both gone, the lot empty except for a wind that didn't care. The captain rewound twice, then a third time, then let the tape play to snow. The story was tightening its own ratchet. The town didn't like the sound. People who had lived with a blank wall for 20 years had grown used to leaning against it. A wall that begins to move makes the furniture of your life wobble. The diner stopped humming. Conversations got shorter, sharper. A group of men who used to talk loud about hunting and taxes now spoke low about debts that men in green trucks had kept other men in. Names came out that had been kept under ice. One was a parts jobber from out by the county line who had sold the Keen's barrel pumps and solvent in unmarked containers. A man who kept his invoices careful and generic and his eyes shiny with the knowledge that paper is a living thing and can bite. He said he didn't remember details. The captain asked him about wintergreen and cigarettes and left-handed signatures. The jobber's eyes lost their shine long enough to show the gray beneath. He asked if he needed a lawyer. The captain said he needed to tell the truth now, or watch it tell itself without him later in a tone that wouldn't love him. Morrissey, who had retired from the badge, but not from the case, returned to the river because the river had been the most honest witness so far. He walked the bank where the lockbox had clanged and looked downstream to where a snag had caught the winter's trash. He saw a shape in the foul bouquet of sticks and tires and plastic, a rectangle with rounded corners the color of dead wood. He climbed down the riprap carefully, knees complaining, and tugged. A second lockbox came loose, lighter than it should have been, its latch sprung long ago. Inside, nothing. Not nothing. Dust and a smell like the inside of an old camera shop. Imprint in the dust of an object that had been there and was now not, a cassette case. He called the captain before he breathed the next breath. The captain arrived with gloved hands and the look of a man who has been waiting to be disappointed, and was disappointed and also not. The emptiness mattered. Someone had come back to the river after the first winter. Someone had decided to remove the second tape that an earlier conscience or coward had set free. Removal is its own record. Prince of absence, the anthropologist had said. The river keeps what the land coughs up. The land a while ago had coughed up a man with a scar who had learned to erase. Erase is not delete. You can thin a line until it looks like air, but the line still hums if you put your ear to it. The audio techs went back to the reels and found a click they had treated as mechanical. It was not. It came in pairs, not evenly spaced, like two men checking watches like a habit. They overlaid the clicks from 3 tapes. The spacing matched the rhythm of men tightening lug nuts in a star pattern. 2, 3, 5, 5, 3, 2. The second voice's counting had not been random. It had been muscle memory, a mechanic's prayer. The techs built a profile of work from sound. The captain stared at the chart like it was a portrait. In its lines, the older brother stood up without a face. The hospital tape, the ditch chrome, the impound frame, the grill badge, the left-handed loop, the wintergreen smell, the fairground clip, the mirror scar. Threads braided themselves while the town watched and tried to decide if it felt relief or dread. Relief requires the luxury of certainty. Dread does not. Dread walks with you to the mailbox and reads your bills. Hannah's mother baked bread now and left loaves on porches, unannounced, as if to feed the hunger she could not name. Hannah's father sat on the front steps at dusk and listened to the road and heard nothing that satisfied. He recorded night sounds on a little digital thing his grandson set up and played them back in the morning. Because sometimes memory outsources itself to plastic, he brought a clip to the captain and said, "Listen, it was only wind." Except there was a pattern in it like a harmonic, and once you heard it, you couldn't not hear it. The ghost of an engine on a road that had not seen traffic at that hour in years. The captain nodded and said he heard it too. He did. He heard everything now, including the sound of his own name wearing thin. Pressure finds cracks. The parts jobber broke first. He came in at noon with a lawyer who looked like he had been told to keep the building from falling with his bare hands. The jobber said he had delivered drums to a storage unit out by the road the year before the disappearance. He said a man with a hooked scar had paid cash and asked no questions, and that the other brother had stood by the door pretending to be on the phone to avoid looking anyone in the eye. He said he had carried in a heavy cooler because the brothers said they had backs that were tired. He said when he set the cooler down it had clinked like glass against glass. He said he had not looked inside and he had gone home and eaten stew like it was any other night and he had slept. He said he did not sleep much now. He signed a statement with his right hand. He made a cross with his left on the table when he thought no one watched. Morrissey watched and said nothing because he understood private rituals and the way men try to balance their own ledgers when the county's books don't show a column for mercy. The storage unit had been cleared years ago, but Cement remembers. They brought a luminol kit even though laughter had greeted the idea last time. No one laughed this time. The floor bloomed in pale galaxies in one corner where the cooler had likely sat. The shape of the bloom was not a splash, it was a rectangle, clean edges, as if something had been set there and drained. Blood and bleach dance under blue light like reluctant partners. The lab would need weeks. The captain didn't wait for a number. He traced the rectangle on a piece of butcher paper and pinned it beside the map and the fairground photo in the mirror still. He stared at the collage until it stopped being paper and became weather again. Night brought a visitor, a woman in a long coat, not young, not old, the kind of age that makes people ignore you first and regret it later, knocked at the captain's door at 10. She said she had kept something too long. She said in winter 2001 she had cleaned rooms above her garage for cash and hadn't asked names because names bring complaints, and complaints bring inspections, and inspections kill small incomes. She said 2 men had rented for a week and had been polite in the way men are when they don't want their faces remembered. She said one had a jaw that moved sideways when he chewed. She said the other smoked wintergreen and counted while he worked his hands. She said after they left, she had found in the dresser a single Polaroid face down and she had flipped it and looked and put it back face down and slid the drawer shut because the eyes of the woman in the photograph had made her feel like a thief in her own house. She said she had buried that picture under a stack of Sears catalogs because fear is practical. She said she had dug it out when the river gave up the first lockbox and then had put it back because fear is also patient. She said she had brought it now because something in the wind had changed and she didn't want to die with it in her furniture. She handed the captain a zip bag. Inside, a Polaroid whose chemicals had aged to a green that made skin look like paper. A woman's face, Hannah, not smiling, not terrorized. Just present, like a driver at a red light thinking of nothing except the next green. She wore scrubs. The corner of the photograph had handwritten letters, HB 1101, and a second hand had added later in a different ink, burn. The photograph was a punch. It took the room a full minute to breathe again. The captain asked the woman if the men had said anything he could use. She said only one thing that stayed in her ears. The older one, the wintergreen throat, had looked out the window once at a flurry beginning and had said, "Good, snow keeps secrets," and the younger had said, "Only if you are smarter than snow." The captain wrote the sentence down and stared at the handwriting, his, not the brother's, and felt a blur of anger at paper for its arrogance, that it thinks it can hold things without consequence. He gave the woman coffee in gratitude. He walked her to the door and watched the street for a hooded shape because ritual demanded it. The street held only cold. They put the Polaroid beside the map and the tape reels and the ditch chrome. The wall now felt like a person about to speak. The state attorney called again and said, with careful words, that the file had met the threshold years ago and every second beyond that cost money and light that could go to other cases without faces staring out of green photographs. The captain said the town didn't spend light, it hoarded it. The attorney said juries don't try ghosts. The captain said ghosts try towns. Snow returned like a curtain closing before the last act. Plows dragged lines into the night. The county settled, as if preparing for a truth it couldn't swallow in one bite. Morrissey drove the road to Spot A because the way home runs through habit. He saw reflectors ahead blown down by wind, and beyond them a shape off the shoulder that should not be there. He stopped, put his hazards on, walked into the ditch with his flashlight low, the way hunters do in fog to keep the beam from blinding them. The shape was a panel door, not car, not house, shed door, maybe, or storage unit spillover. It had been stripped of hardware except for a single hinge still bolted at one end. The hinge had teeth marks, not animal, pliers. A man had taken something apart here at speed and thrown pieces into the ditch. Morrissey raised the light, and the beam caught a scatter of zip ties hardened to glass, a melted rectangle of plastic that could have been a badge holder in a former life, a char streak in the dirt that defied this week's weather and said Old Fire had loved this spot deeply. He stood very still and listened. He heard his own breath in the creek, and farther off, the stubborn cough of a bad engine turning over and failing, as if someone, somewhere, still tried to start something that the town refused to let run. The captain arrived to a ditch that looked like a sentence halfway across a page, waiting for its verb. He knelt in the mud as if prayer had finally taught him the right posture. He picked up the melted badge plastic and felt, absurdly, like apologizing to it. He imagined the tapes, the counting, the 2 engines, the stop, record habit of a thumb that could not stop documenting even when it tried to erase. He imagined a winter of men moving in choreography learned from work. Tighten, loosen, lift, carry, burn. He imagined a woman stepping into her car because home was close and mercy closer, and he felt the county inside him tilt a degree toward an edge. They would find more when the ground gave up what it had hidden. They would trace the frame number to a borrowed name and a stolen check. They would interview a barber again and ask him to describe the scar not as memory, but as map. They would return to the hospital tape and enhance one more corner until a faint silhouette of a man in a knit cap, shoulders hunched against spit snow, appeared watching the lot from across the road. He would look like every man who has ever waited, which is to say he would look like a question. They would write it down. The press would call what they had a closure, and the captain would stand under microphones and read sentences that did not shake because he was good at not shaking. He would say the case was solved. He would hear in his own mouth the echo that says otherwise. He would walk off the podium into the same weather as everyone else and climb into his car and sit while the engine warmed and think of a river that keeps ledgers better than courts. He would drive past the vigil site and see someone standing apart in a hood and not turn his head because some rituals you let the night perform alone. The wall in the task force room waited, the map waited, the Polaroid waited. The chrome D from the ditch caught light from a weak lamp and turned it into something stronger than it had any right to be. The county, breathing in cautious sips, rehearsed for the thing after closure that no one names. And in that rehearsal, in the counting that happens between one and the next number, in the pivot, where a mechanic turns his wrist and feels a nut seat true, the town found, if not peace, then rhythm. And rhythm, in Maine, in winter, is how you live with a solved case that still talks when you close the file, a solved case that lays down beside you in the dark and hums like an engine you can't see, an engine with 2 voices and 1 scar, an engine that will keep idling in the mind until the river decides, at last, to put even its ghosts to sleep. The rain arrived like a verdict, warm and sudden, flattening the town's spring optimism into slick pages that turned themselves. It came hard enough to lift gravel and wake ditches and make the Kennebec speak in a faster tongue. The captain welcomed it the way farmers welcome plow lines, practical, unsentimental. Rain turns secrets soft. Rain moves what men tried to set in concrete. On the second day of the downpour, a call came from a scrap man who kept a yard behind a collapsing barn out by Salmon Brook, a man who never involved himself with county business unless rust began to look like evidence. He said the ground had slumped near his fence and swallowed the corner of a pile he'd built 12 years ago out of doors and sheet metal and good intentions. He said something hard was peeking through the mud with the patient gleam of things that wait. The task force rolled up with boots and tarps and the steady gait of people who have learned not to sprint at hope. The scrap man pointed, chewing a toothpick like it owed him rent. They pulled away a refrigerator door and a mattress spring and a tin sign for a defunct soda and found a barrel whose rim showed through the muck like a coin at the bottom of a fountain. Blue plastic, no labels, a smear along the side that smelled like solvent and old wintergreen. The captain squatted, laid his gloved hand on the drum, and felt the latent chill that grips plastic that has kept its secrets under soil. They didn't open it there. They lifted it with care, rolled it to the truck, watched rain slide off its back as if the barrel itself were sweating. Back at the lab, they cut the rim and peeled the lid and met the smell everyone had expected, ammonia and oil and a chemical sweetness that never forgets the nose that first learned it. Inside the drum, rags, heavy, dense as regret, tangled with zip ties and a broken hinge whose teeth still held a sliver of wood. At the bottom, under the rags, a cassette shell without tape, the plastic cracked where a thumb would press to pop it open, absent sitting in liquid, evidence of removal again. The captain said the word again out loud without meaning to, and the room heard what he meant. Someone's ritual had included documenting and erasing in the same breath. The lab teased a hair from one rag and coaxed a partial profile out of it that pointed to the brother we knew, the dead one, Thomas. And that meant nothing and everything because it said he had handled cleanup as carefully as he had tuned choke cables. Barrels, drums, coolers, sheds. The county's inventory of containers made a kind of prayer book now, a liturgy of hiding. A deputy who had grown up on the low streets behind the old mill said out of nowhere that people around here didn't bury what they feared. They nested it, one thing inside another, like they were building a set of Russian dolls, where the smallest doll was guilt. The captain wrote that paraphrase onto a sticky note and slapped it on the map to remind himself that metaphors can show you where to dig. He looked at the path from the hospital lot to Spot A, to the ditch, to the impound yard, to Salmon Brook, and saw, not scatter, but a patient arc, the way a hand writes a letter over and over until it finds the muscle memory and stops thinking. He asked the rookie to pull every pawn shop ledger from 2000 to 2002. The idea came like a flicker and then sat still. Men who work with their hands trade one kind of machine for another when money thins. Phones for drills. Drills for radios. Radios for watches. He wanted watches. He wanted cassettes. He wanted the husk of any device that might have eaten and kept magnetic ghosts. There were 3 pawn shops then, 2 now. The surviving one had ledgers and binders, paper gone suede with thumb oil. The owner had the look of a man who remembered his town better than it remembered him. He brought the books out and let the captain and the rookie and Morrissey page through while the fan in the ceiling made the air busy. They found cassette decks sold for $20 cash with no name. Month after month, winter of 2001 into spring. They found an answering machine surrendered for $5 in January. They found the line item that mattered by accident, because the rookie's finger stopped on the page where a left-handed loop had signed, and the slash had crossed the loop too hard and torn the paper. The machine that had been traded was on a back shelf, orphaned, not connected to anything in this century. The owner shrugged. People don't buy old ways to listen. The captain asked if anybody ever checks the trays on those things, the little rooms where tapes sleep and forget to wake. The owner said he didn't. He said sometimes dust is all the past leaves you. The captain nodded toward the back. The owner brought the machine forward. The plastic yellowed into a color like smoker's teeth. The tray opened with a noise of dry rot. Empty, the way absence keeps presenting itself like a magic trick performed too many times. But the tray had a lint of magnetic dust. The text later would hold it like pollen, coax out nothing audible, and still treat it like prayer ash. Not proof. A gesture from history. The owner did have an old Polaroid he kept because he liked faces. He used to take a picture of anyone who sold him something significant and pin it to the back wall like a chorus line for memory. Most faces had fallen. One remained under a pushpin that had rusted to the cork. A man standing side-on as if any camera's truth might bite him, a cap low, his jawline tight, the thin white seam pulling at the mouth's corner like a fishhook. The pinhole left a bite in the photo right where the scar curved. The captain took the photo as if it might spark. He asked if the man had sold the answering machine or something else. The owner didn't remember. People become a blur when they want to be. He remembered wintergreen. He remembered the man's left hand on the counter. He remembered the cap. He remembered counting cash twice. The captain walked the strip behind Maine in the rain after that and let the town talk in its old way, in clacks and hisses and drains. He passed the laundromat where the owner had confessed to having thrown away a clip. He passed the barber who had cut the scar twice. He passed the diner where men with old boots chewed regret until it turned sweet. He was not listening for words. He was listening for pattern. Left, right, left, like footsteps that favor one leg. 2, 3, 5, like tightening a star until the wheel sits true. He went back to the tapes, not to hear the men, but to hear the habit. The text took the glove off the data and let him feel it. There, in the background on one reel, under the voices, a radio low and constant. White noise is never white. It carries faint things if you lean close enough. The radio is not on a station. It was tuned to space, but every minute or so a local dispatch beep bled into the hum like a patient's heart monitor beeping faint through a wall. The captain timed the beeps. He asked dispatch to pull logs from winter 2001. The graveyard shift, minute by minute, beep by beep. The logs matched the beeps down to the second. Not proof of location, but proof of vicinity. The second tape had been made inside of a mile from the sheriff's radio tower. That tower lived between the hospital and Spot A narrowing of the world. He sent a pair of deputies to walk the mile around that tower with an ear for dead buildings, shells where men could sit and count and breathe smoke. They found one without trying. The county kept an old pump house out there that had been shut since a freeze busted the main back before some of the rookies were born. The padlock was new, too new to match the gray on the hinges. Inside, dust held the footprints of mice and men. A folding chair sat in the corner facing the door, a radio on a milk crate beside it, plugged into the wall that still carried ghost power from a line someone had forgotten to cut. Next to the radio, a hardware store bag with a carton of cigarettes, wintergreen brand unopened, and a scratch-off lottery ticket that had expired in 2003. The bag's print showed a phone number for a store that had changed its area code after consolidation. Human Habit says cigarettes don't sit untouched for 20 years unless someone leaves decisively. Human Habit says chairs face doors when men expect company or fear it. On the floor lay a small square of tape with mud around the edges where it had once held a label tight to plastic. The deputies bagged what could be bagged. The captain stared at the empty chair when they carried it in and thought of men staging their own comfort, making little rooms out of nowhere to hold their rituals of counting and listening and waiting. If Martin had been there, if he had sat in that chair and tuned the radio to nothing, he had done it because he wanted to hear the county breathe while he worked. A true mechanic learns to listen while his hands move, a second attention that counts on the body to finish tasks while the mind tracks shifts in the air. The captain believed Martin had done both, had kept one ear on the county and one hand on the wheel of his own erasure. The lab called about the chrome D and the culvert bolt. The alloy mix and stamp said one specific factory run in 1997. The state database could not tell them which truck. But a salvage yard downstate, run by a woman with an eye for patterns and a memory like a ledger that never closed, knew that run had a quirk, a mismatch that caused a tiny rattle in cold if the grill was mounted by a left-handed man who over-tightened one side out of force of habit. She said she had heard that rattle in a yard truck that had passed through her hands in 2002, a green Dodge with a front end that looked recently scabbed. She said the man who brought it in had a hook of a scar and chewed gum like it owed him. She said he didn't give a name, but he smelled like wintergreen and solvent and old boots. She said he counted money left-handed and signed a slip with a loop and a slash. She faxed a copy of the slip, the paper so thin the ink bled through, the signature like a self-portrait done angry. The captain watched the fax print out, slow, and felt time do the same in his body. If this were a movie, this is where the chase would start. This is where tires would spit water and engines would howl and the town would gather at windows to watch handcuffs find wrists. But the county had already had its tidy ending on paper when Thomas was named and sealed. This was not chase. This was sediment turning back into story. They went looking not for a man, but for a path. They traced the slip to a bank where the man had cashed out because people who travel without papers travel with cash, and the bank camera that winter had been down because the manager had delayed replacing a part that did not seem urgent. The clerk remembered a cap and a scar. Everyone remembered the scar now. The scar had become a town's memory of guilt, a logo stamped onto the face of winter. But the clerk remembered something else too. He remembered the man flinching when a snowplow clattered past the window. Not fear exactly, but a brace, as if Snow was a coworker with bad manners. He remembered the man's left leg stiff when he turned away. He remembered the man pocketing his cash and lifting his chin as if refusing to bow to any building that kept ledgers. Morrissey, who had stopped pretending he could sleep on nights when rain hammered, drove the roads with the patience of men who carry 2 decades in their mirrors. He turned onto a spur that ran past the old pump house and saw fresh tire tracks that did not belong to the county. He followed them into a stand of fur that hunched against the weather like men at a funeral doorway. The tracks ended at a clearing where a shed had once stood, where it had burned years ago, where ash had told a story badly and then been read with new eyes. The rain had cleaned the ash into hard gray and pulled from it a shape that the first fires had failed to obliterate. Iron, heavy, bent into a near circle, a wheel rim, deformed by heat and time, its lug holes a star that still made sense. Morrissey crouched under the umbrella of his own shoulders and traced the star pattern with a finger because the body learns the truth before the mouth can. 2, 3, 5, 5, 3, 2. He did not call the captain first. He sat in the rain and counted again until the number of points on the star matched the count he had heard on the tape in his bones. Only then did he reach for the radio. Only then did he say, quietly, like a man reading a name aloud at last, that he was standing on a ghost of a routine. The wheel rim went into the evidence room. The Polaroid stayed on the wall. The empty cassette case dried on its tray. The chair from the pump house sat in a corner where you could not help but see it when you came in. The captain gathered his people and told them what they already knew, that the tale had sharpened its edges without giving them the single clean cut that people in suits like to call closure. He told them the state would not reopen what the state believed had been closed. He told them towns reopen themselves whether the state approves or not. He told them to keep walking, to keep listening, to keep expecting a second lockbox to rise when the river changed its mind. He told them to treat absence as aggressive as presence. He told them to bring him small things with patient hands. Night brought him one more. A letter, no return, paper cheap, folded hard enough to leave ridges. Inside, 5 sentences in block print like a man teaching himself to be someone else. You're looking in the right places. Snow doesn't keep secrets. Men do. Stop digging behind the shed. Start digging under the floor. Country Line Road. The old blue house with the aluminum siding. The one that went back to the bank. The last line. You already stood on it. He read it twice and felt the house step into the room. The aluminum siding had been a detail thrown away in conversation, a throwaway in a county that asphyxiates on throwaways. He took Morrissey and the rookie and 2 deputies and drove in the rain and the dark to a place the bank owned and nobody loved. The back door stuck at the bottom where swelling had made wood meet wood like teeth. The floor inside sagged like the house side. They found the room fast, not by badge, but by nose. Solvent, old smoke, wintergreen. The boards near the center were newer than the rest, tight, proud, nails unpainted. They pried one up, then another. Under the floor lay a shallow trench lined with tar paper, empty now except for a single object placed as if on purpose for the first eyes to see it. A key, not to a lock, to a cassette case. The kind that slides into a deck and clicks with a sound everyone born before a certain year recognizes without thinking. The captain did not reach for it. He looked at the outline of the trench, the care taken, the way a man had built a drawer under his life to hide things, and then, one day, had emptied it like a pocket and walked. He bent, picked up the key with a gloved hand, and turned it over. Stamped on the flat, a letter, M, not a confession, not mercy, but a mark that said the second voice had fingers and habits and took time to leave small things for people like the captain to find because men who erase also narrate, even if they tell themselves they don't. They put the key in a bag and the bag in a box, and the box on a shelf beside the empty tape case and the wheel rim and the Polaroid and the chrome D and the bolt in the chair, a museum of a town that refuses to forget itself. Outside, the rain thinned. On the river, trash snagged on pylons and loosened and moved along. The vigil candles flared and went low and flared again. Someone stood apart under a hood, the way shadows keep their manners, and left before anyone asked a question that would make the night speak its name. The captain drove home slow, radio off, engine a steady hum he respected. He parked and sat in the car and counted lug nuts in his head until the numbers stopped making pictures. He went inside and put the letter in the drawer where he kept the fork with the bent tine that his mother had used to test cake and oil and anything else worth knowing. And he smiled at his own foolishness because you cannot eat letters, and he had tried to for years. He slept and dreamed the sound of a cassette engaging, that little mechanical throat clearing before a voice begins, and when he woke, a gull crying over the river made the same shape of sound, and he understood with the clarity of mornings that the county would walk this path until it wore a groove deep enough to lay a final bone in, or until the brother with the scar decided that the habit of erasing had bored him, and that his last faithful practice would be to let the tape run without hitting stop. Rain left the town, rinsed but not clean, the kind of shine that shows every old scratch, and the key with the stamped M sat in a clear bag on the captain's desk, like a punctuation mark the sentence hadn't reached yet. He turned the bag in his hand, listening to plastic whisper, listening to the low building hum of the station as if the walls breathed. Habit says you try the key in anything that looks like a lock, even in the imagination. He pictured a cassette case with its brittle teeth and that satisfying click, pictured a desk drawer lined with felt in some hidden room, pictured a shed rebuilt and relocked in a man's mind even after fire took the wood. The rookie came in with coffee that had forgotten what warmth was and said dispatch had a caller who wouldn't give a name and wanted to trade a story for a safe place to talk. The caller said he'd worked scrap, he knew the brothers, and he'd thrown away something he shouldn't have years ago, plastic baggies filled with powdery rust that didn't weigh like rust, and it had kept him up for 3 nights running now that the river was spitting up conscience. The captain told the rookie to bring him in and not to use the front door. No point in teaching the town who confesses in which hallway. The man's face looked like salvage, scarred, serviceable, eyes as jumpy as crickets. He sat on the edge of the chair like a man who doesn't let wood claim him. He said Thomas had kept reels because he kept everything, every carb jet and cotter pin and bearing cap, because you never know when the world will demand a part. He said the older brother had kept silence, like the same kind of part, and only traded it when he had to. He said one night in 2002, a year after the snow, he helped haul out old audio junk from the pump house that the county had forgotten, a crate that clicked with plastic mouths, and he had asked where to dump it, and the older brother had said the ditch doesn't ask questions. He said he had thrown the crate into the ditch behind the blue house with the aluminum siding because the men paid cash, and a man with a past learns to like cash. He said he had not slept well since the lockbox came up, because once the river starts returning things, it teaches you what your hands weighed when you were younger. The captain asked him if he remembered a key. The man said no, only mouths without tongues. The captain let him go because he wasn't a suspect. He was a small door, and small doors let in weather. They went to the ditch behind the blue house because doing something beats sitting with ghosts. The ground was still a wet lung, pulling at their boots, and the culvert there made a sound like a throat clearing. They sifted with rakes and magnets again, enough irony to make a cynical man laugh, and came up with nothing they hadn't already learned to expect. Shards of cases, tongues popped, hinges tasty to pliers. But under the throat of the culvert, a single intact case had wedged itself between stone and root, the kind of luck that belongs to stories when they decide to keep you. They coaxed it free with gloved fingers for fear of breaking the only thing the county might still listen to. It was empty. Of course it was. You don't get magic that easy. But the lock pin was still in place, and the captain slid the bag open and tried the M key because habit is faith. It turned as if happy to be asked. The click was small, home-shaped, and everyone standing there heard what it meant. The key belonged to this family of mouths, even if this mouth had been picked clean. Absence again, but absence that welcomed a key made by a man who believed in locking memory even while he made it. He took the empty case and the key back to the lab and set them beside the chair and the Polaroid and the wheel rim and the chrome D, as if building an altar to a god who specialized in routine. The audio techs came in with faces that looked like bad news. They had been listening to the background roar of the second reel the woman had brought to the vigil and found, under the radio hiss. Not a dispatch beep this time, but a dull thump repeating every 11 seconds, steady as a heartbeat from a machine. The lab bench vibrated at the same rate when the refrigerator in the far corner kicked on. They measured the frequency and matched it to an industrial pump the county had installed in the late 90s at the quarry, the pump that kept groundwater out of a cut that should have drowned itself. The quarry sat in a horseshoe of hills, and the pump house there was sister to the one already found. Same contractors, same wiring, same bad habit of leaving a trickle of power in a line long after the paperwork set off. The captain drove out with Morrissey and the rookie, tires stuttering on washboard gravel, sky low like a hand. The quarry held sound the way a church holds light. The pump house door took a pry bar and a cuss to come open. Inside, dust. A bird's nest in a corner made from cut strings and human hair that made the rookie swallow. A card table with 2 chairs. And on the table, an ashtray with 3 cigarette butts turned to soft cork by time. Wintergreen brand, filters bent to crescents by a habitual squeeze. On the floor near the wall outlet, a ghost square of clean concrete where something had sat for a long time and then been removed, leaving behind an absence-shaped brightness. The captain knelt and placed the empty cassette case in the middle of the square like a child playing match game. The fit was absurd, perfect, meaningless, everything. Morrissey, who had learned to wait out most of the county's theater, pointed with a pencil at the corner where tar paper had been taped to the floor with duct tape corners still stuck down, as if someone had once built a weather skirt around a machine. The pencil tapped the tape twice. The sound was when you know you're near wood, not stone. Beneath concrete was subfloor, beneath subfloor was ground, and beneath ground was the county's patience. They cut a small square of concrete where the tape lines met and poured water to keep dust settled and pried the square up like a tile. Underneath, a hidey hole the size of a lunch pail, tar paper lined, empty now except for 1 coin and a small square of paper stuck to the tar like a dead moth. The coin was a quarter from 2000, state design, a girl jumping rope on one side. And that detail seemed cruel because tapes count time, and girls who used to jump rope stop. The paper came free with tweezers and said nothing but carried on its back a reverse image in ink, mirror-printed letters that, when held to light, resolved themselves into the end of a label. N13. Not proof, but an echo. Jan 13. The date on the toolbox tape label. The date the town had anchored itself to for 2 decades. The captain put the coin in a bag and the moth paper in another and closed his eyes long enough to let the quarry air print itself on his lungs. 2 chairs meant 2 men waited here. The ashtray carried 3 butts because habit doesn't count the same way evidence does. He looked at the chairs and thought of 2 engines. He thought of men who practice erasing by leaving only what they can't help but leave. A rhythm, a trace, a postage of ink flipped backwards by damp. He thought of the tape mouths, opened, emptied, refilled with water and silt in years. They spread from the quarry like dye in a basin, hitting all the places within a radius that could have held a man bent on listening, counting, staging erasure as ritual. Shacks, pump houses, storage closets, and outbuildings nobody locked because no one cared. The rookie found in a power shed near the radio tower a single cassette leader, the clear start of a tape with no tape attached, stuck to a spider web that had kept it like a shrine. The text said it meant nothing. The captain said it meant a spider had done better record keeping than some humans. In the old blue house, back in the room where the floor trench had held its little drawer, they lifted the surrounding boards and followed the tar paper like a path. It led under the wall and died there, cut short by a stud that had split and blackened, maybe by moisture, maybe by a heat that traveled between materials the way ideas do. They opened the wall and found only air and the smell of old solvent. They kept going because the letter had said you already stood on it, and the county had taught them that it rarely sits in the first place you think. The letter, anonymous block print, came again, a twin envelope with a second note. Stop chasing phantoms. Look at the late shift parking lights, the way the shadows fall. The captain took the hospital VHS back out and watched with the lights off while the audio techs worked the tape like a doctor working a stubborn joint. Sodium lights cast shadows with hard edges, strangers to moonlight. He watched the frame where Hannah looked over her shoulder. He watched the frame where the truck profile cut the snow. He watched the reflection that no one had cared about. The shadow of a third light beyond the camera's field, a low scooped illumination that did not belong to a truck. Portable lamp? Work light? He replayed it until a thought walked in like a man with permission. Men whose stage scenes bring their own weather and their own light. The red route had looped around the farmhouse road as if someone had wanted the sheriff to find Hannah in one place while the men worked in another. The open car door, the watch face ticking, the footprints that stopped at the riverbank felt suddenly like theater props arranged by men who believed in narrative more than cops did. He called up an old seasonal worker who had mowed the hospital grounds then and who now fixed outboard motors in a shack that smelled like gasoline and feathers. The man said one winter night he had seen two men carry a lamp from a pickup into the far corner of the lot because the breaker had tripped and those lights always died in the small hours when wind put a shoulder into the lines. He said he had told a security guard, and the guard had shrugged because men carrying lamps did not register as sin. The guard had died since. The lamp would be in a closet that for years had kept things that only remembered their own handles. They found it sitting on a shelf, cord brittle, bulb gone. The techs found on its base a smear of something that the lab said with a yawn was likely oil. The captain wanted a miracle, and the lab gave him chemistry. He took the base in his hand and felt, like a fool and like a detective, the weight of objects that had looked at Hannah the last time she was seen alive. Sometimes touch is what you get when answers won't sit. The state attorney called again, not impatient now, wary, asking whether the captain needed to think about the families of other victims who had no tapes to teach them to grieve in chapters. The captain said he thought about them every time he looked at the Polaroid, because a photograph is the opposite of a tape. It stops time and lies about motion. He said this case was teaching the town how to read itself, and he would not close a book in the middle for the comfort of a docket's report. He hung up and stared out the window at a street that looked like recovery and felt like rehearsal. Night fell while the county waited for thaw 2 of the season, the one that loosens more than mud. Morrissey drove past the vigil spot because he had promised himself he would not pass it by accident. A figure under a hood stood at the rail, hands in pockets, posture practiced. Morrissey stopped, left his engine running, walked up until courtesy required speech, and said the weather would turn again by week's end. The hooded figure didn't answer. He turned just enough that the light from the bridge stuck to the edge of his jaw, and if there was a scar, it hid in shadow like a habit. The man took a step back and then another and dissolved into the path behind the trees, footsteps soft the way people walk who have taught their bodies to forget their own weight. Morrissey didn't follow because he had learned not to chase shadows. You mark their direction, and you let the county bring them back. He leaned on the rail and listened for river speech, and instead heard a mechanical click in the dark behind him, the little mechanical throat clear of a cassette engaging. He spun, flashlight up, beam wide, nothing but night. The click came again, farther off, like someone at the edge of the path with a tape player in his pocket testing a button with a thumb that couldn't shake a lifelong habit. The sound died into tree sound. Morrissey stood there too long for his knees, and then went back to the car and said nothing about the click on the radio because you don't give Rumor a patrol car to ride in. Morning brought a box to the station, cheap cardboard taped with care, no return, postmark smudged by rain. Inside, not a tape. A notebook, the kind mechanics use to track hours and parts, pages printed with columns. The first page held nothing but numbers and shorthand that looked like parts lists to an untrained eye. The last pages held the same, but in the middle someone had started writing a different kind of inventory. dates that matched known moments in the case, and verbs that hung like hooks: move, lift, carry, burn, and next to them counts 2 and 3 and 5, and places written in code that was not hard to break if you had walked the county: PH for pump house, QP for quarry pump, RT for radio tower. The handwriting leaned left, the loops closed tight, the slashes aggressive, no names, no confessions, but routine rendered into ink by a man who trusted muscle memory more than he trusted language and had made for himself a liturgy. The captain closed the book when his chest tightened because he didn't want to hyperventilate in front of the rookie, who was watching him with that expression of the very young who think patience is a weapon they don't yet deserve. He opened the book again and turned the middle page over slowly like he was not allowed to startle it. A small square had been cut out neatly, as if someone had needed a clean piece of paper to write a note outside the notebook. The cut left a window through which you could see the last words on the next page: stop recuer, and then the tear. He smiled without joy. Martin, if it was Martin, had cut out his own instruction and mailed its absence back. They bagged the notebook, they logged the coin, they filed the lamp. They moved slower now, not from fatigue but from respect. The town breathed in long pulls like a swimmer who has learned the rhythm of a cold pond and will not panic even when the body begs for the shore. The captain drove out to the blue house one more time, let himself in like a landlord of a ghost, stood over the rescued trench, and listened as the wind crawled through aluminum and said a word that might have been nothing and might have been a name. He took the key from its bag and clicked it into the empty case again, because faith loves repetition. And he let the click echo in the hollow room and thought of how some men cannot stop making tapes even when they swear they will burn them. How the thumb moves on its own, stop, record, hymn of a county that had trained itself to speak and to erase in the same breath. He turned off his flashlight to see the dark honestly. He waited until his eyes began to register weather and shape, and the memory of a lamp that once had cast a hard-edged shadow in a hospital lot. He said quietly to the boards and the nails and the tar paper and to anyone else who might be listening with a tape machine buried in a coat, "We hear you. We're not done." And the house said nothing back the way houses do when they've heard too much to trust words. And the wind moved through aluminum like a cassette fast-forwarding to a place where a thumb was going to look for stop and find, at last, that there was none. Rain left its fingerprint on everything and then backed off, as if the sky had signed but refused to own the words, and the notebook with its left-leaning loops sat in the evidence light like a confession that refused nouns, a catechism of verbs: move, lift, carry, burn, stacked against dates that bruised the calendar. The captain read it until the columns stopped being ink and turned into footsteps on a floor he could hear. 2, 3, 5, 5, 3, 2. He traced the middle pages where the neat square had been cut out, the window showing "Stop Rec" on the sheet below, and felt, not for the first time, that he was standing in a room designed by a man who trusted ritual more than he trusted God. He called the rookie over and had him read the codes aloud, not because the rookie would see something the captain hadn't, but because the act of speaking remakes weather. PH, QP, RT, abbreviations that had become coordinates stitched into the county's skin. On the margin of one date, Jan 20, sat a mark the shape of a bent staple pressed into the paper without piercing it, a nervous habits fossil. He closed the book and opened it again, and still the mark waited like a small door. The anonymous letters had tone now, the shrug of a man who had spent years practicing indifference and found it failed him late. Stop chasing phantoms. Look at the late shift parking lights, the way the shadows fall. The captain took the hospital VHS to the lab one more time and asked the techs to pull shadow angles like teeth. Sodium lamps throw hard edges, portable lamps throw a slope. On the frame where Hannah's head tilted, the shadow of her car fell one way and the shadow of a man beyond the camera fell another, as if two suns had argued overhead. The portable lamp had been set low, scooped upward the way mechanics light wheel wells. Men carry their trades with them even into crimes. He drew a line from that slope to the notebook's middle blank, asked himself what instruction had been cut out there. Stop recording, stop returning, stop rehearsing. He wrote all three on a sticky note and hated all of them for being right and wrong in the same breath. The day he decided to stop waiting for thaw and start making it, the captain drove to the radio tower alone, left the cruiser a mile back, and walked the ring of pump houses and shacks in a slow circle like an animal checking a fence. The air had the cold metal taste of a quarry morning. He passed the pump house chair in his mind, the milk crate radio, the ashtray with wintergreen corks, and stopped where the scrub thinned to show a low concrete structure that had not been on any county list because it had never belonged to the county. It had belonged to a contractor who had set it to store fuel in the late 90s and then left it to be a fact no ledger wanted. The door was chained, lock bright against dull steel. Bright doesn't live here unless it's bought yesterday. He knelt and touched the lock and felt warmth where no sun had hit. Somebody's hand had held it not long ago. He stood, centered his breath and listened. The silence had a seam. Under wind, a low sub-audible throb. Not the quarry pump this time. Not traffic. More intimate. A small generator idling, choked low, the kind of sound a cautious man loves. He did not force the door. He stepped away and called Morrissey, who answered with that inhale men make when news arrives dressed as inevitability. They came back at dusk, 4 of them, no lights, boots telling the ground their names. The lock gave under a tool like memory, gives under ritual. Inside, air with a solvent edge, a rectangle of space where a generator had indeed sat until very recently, drag marks fresh as handwriting, an extension cord snaking to a wall outlet that carried illegal power from a line no one had paid for in 2 decades. On a crate sat a portable lamp with its head tilted up, bad theater cue frozen mid-gesture. Beside it, a plastic grocery bag with nothing in it but 1 cassette leader, clear tape with no tape attached, punched with 2 sprocket holes like eyes. The rookie bagged it like gold leaf. On the concrete, a scrape the size of a shoebox, corner burnished by habit. The captain set the empty case from the blue house ditch in that scrape and felt the fit click in his bones. You could almost hear it, the little throat-clearing sound of a machine ready to take a voice. He had the power company pull usage logs for the illegal bleed off that line, even though the state had already warned him they weren't paying to chase a dead man's reheated ghosts. The power math wrote a heartbeat, small draws in winter nights across 2 decades clustered around anniversaries, the way hunters returned to old stands not for deer but for memory. A man with a scar and a habit could have sat there years after Thomas died, listening to dispatch beeps like a parishioner at a vigil, tuning the radio to snow so the county would fill his head while his thumbs found stop and record on a machine he'd sworn not to touch. Men do not keep oaths against their hands. They tried a different door. The rookie had grown up in the type of house where people keep tools under sinks and grudges under beds. He said if he were hiding tapes from himself, he'd put one where touching it would be part of daily life, a test and a dare. The barbershop had a back room with a shelf where the owner kept his cash box and a boombox older than the apprentices who swept hair. The boombox had gum in its hinge like a plug. They pried it and found nothing inside but dust and a coin that had wormed into a seam in 2002. But the underside of the shelf wore a little crescent polished by thumbs pressing a hidden latch that wasn't there. Habit leaves shine even when the latch never existed. The barber shook his head and said, "Some men build secret rooms out of muscle memory." He meant Martin without saying his name. He poured the captain coffee that tasted like penance. The pawnshop owner came in without calling because shame needs witnesses. He had found in a drawer the photograph he had pinned under the rusted pushpin, another copy, he said, because he used to print 2 when a face made him uneasy. And on the back of this one, unlike the first, he had written a date and a word, FEB01, Dodge. He had not remembered writing it until the ink raised itself in noon light. He handed it over with the careful disgust of a man delivering his own error. The captain added it to the wall, and the wall, dense now as a forest, gave back a feeling like wind through needles, direction without map. The state attorney called again with a neutrality that was mercy and threat both. He said a family down in York County needed the lab for a case that hadn't grown old enough to grow legend. The captain said he'd keep his asks sharp. He hung up and stabbed at the notebook again, at the bent staple indentation, at that window cut from the middle where the instruction had been amputated. He took a pencil, laid a sheet over the page, and rubbed until the ghost of the cut square rose in graphite. The edge, the angle, the pressure points where a blade had pressed harder to free it. The depression lined up clean with a date. March 12th. The entry beside it read QP plus RT plus LS, the codes they knew, the last they did not. The letters had the slanted look of a hand trying not to tremble. LS late shift, light stand, lamp stand. The rookie said light scoop and then shrugged as if he had spoken to the wrong room. The captain circled it anyway because wrong rooms are often the right room spoken in the wrong order. At dusk, as if summoned by initials, the river returned to more honest weather. The hooded figure came to the rail again. Morrissey watched from the bridge shadows and made a decision that was half cop, half grandfather. He did not approach. He spoke, voice level, out into the air where a man could receive it without losing his anonymity. He said, "We're listening." The hood didn't turn. It tilted like a man acknowledging a tip without paying the check. A small click came again. Stop, record. And this time Morrissey stepped away on purpose, heels loud, letting the night learn the sound of retreat. Half an hour later, the station bell chimed a delivery. A padded envelope sat on the mat, rain-freckled. Inside, a microcassette, the kind answering machines ate, labeled with a throat-tight economy. LS-312. The captain took it to the lab with the quiet care you reserve for volatile things, grief and nitro alike. The deck they found to play it belonged to a secretary who refused to throw anything away that still made noise. The tape spun with the hungry little whir of its small teeth. The room leaned toward it and learned how quiet a building can be. It gave breath first, a room breath. Then the background purr of a generator throttled low. Then a voice counting in 2s and 3s under its breath, thumb tapping plastic every 5th number. The older voice, dry, buzzed by a throat used hard, said, "Late shift," and the younger, Thomas, cataloged, said, "Light stand," and the letters on the notebook's coded lines slotted into place with a click you could feel on the skin. The lamp scraped concrete, metal feet on floor, then words that made muscles and jaws around the room harden. "She'll see the light, she'll come to it." The older voice said it like instruction to a dog. The younger said nothing. A truck door somewhere in the distance thunked shut. A third presence, or a prop. Footsteps. A door opened, hinge metal on metal. The same hinge noise as on the first tape in the toolbox, proving rooms talk to each other across years. Then nothing but generator hum and the faint bleed of dispatch beeps from a radio tuned to snow. 2 breaths counted the same count. A minute passed. The older voice said, "Burn after." The younger said, "Stop saying that." The tape clicked stop and clicked record within the same second, habit refusing extinction. A scraped laugh, the kind that opens no ribs. Then the tape ended, chewed not by time but by a thumb's impatience. No confession, no scream, just choreography mumbled to machines. The county absorbed it like a blow that also proved bone. The captain walked it to the wall and did not pin it. He set it on the table with the chair and the case and the M key and the Polaroid, a still life of harm. The rookie looked like sleep had become theoretical. He asked if this changed anything. The captain said it changed the angle. Proof turns, not like a key in a lock, but like a lens. LS had been both late shift and light stand, the same initials doing 2 jobs at once. Men who plan in code love ambidextrous letters. He asked the text to lift any stray voice on the microcassette's edges. They found something thin as thread, a third breath, shallow, as if a man with a damaged jaw was sparing it, and the lab swore the sound was too faint to pattern. The captain wrote "third breath" in small letters on the edge of the page and underlined it twice for himself. Breath is presence, no language can bully. He went home and did not sleep, and at 3 went to Hannah Street because guilt in this county knows its own roots. The Bishop house had a lamp in the kitchen that stayed on low at night the way some people keep a candle for their dead. A loaf cooled on the sill, steam making its own weather in the window. He did not knock. He sat on the curb and watched the house breathe and thought of the father with the little digital recorder capturing wind and thinking it was engines. He remembered the mother's line, "The river keeps what it wants until it does not," and understood it now as both warning and promise. He returned to the station before the sun and found Morrissey at the evidence table, hands bracketed on either side of the notebook as if steadying a boat. Morrissey said the bent staple indentation lined up with a staple pattern on the envelope that had delivered the microcassette. He said men who make rituals forget they have tells. He smiled without liking the feel of it. The captain nodded. He said they would stage nothing. They would not bait. They would not put a man with a scar in a corner and watch him spring because this was not a movie and winters here punish theater. They would keep adding small, true things until the pile weighed more than any story a self-erasing man could carry. By noon, the power company called with a note the captain had been hoping for without admitting it. The illegal bleed at the contractor's bunk had spiked briefly 2 nights ago and died for good that same hour. A breaker somewhere tripped with resolve. He marked the time against the microcassette's postmark and against the hood's rail click and felt a circle close without celebration. The man had been there, had sat in his chair, had pressed stop and record one more time, had mailed a mouth without a tongue, and then had turned off his weather. Not a surrender, not yet, but a tired hand laying down a tool. The county did not cheer. It listened. It listened the way men in shops listen for a bearing starting to go bad, jaw quiet, eyes on nothing, ready hands, waiting for the exact second the hum changes into a sound you can name. And night came early as it does when the sky decides to be old and the river took back its ordinary voice, and in the pump house's empty square a moth beat at a bulb no one had bothered to remove, and the chair sat facing the door because that is how it had been taught, and the captain, in a room full of objects that had learned to speak, told his people a true thing that sounded like a prayer. Solved is a press word. The county will finish when it's ready. We will stay until the engine of this stops making noise.